A billionaire queen, a broken man. One desperate night that ignited a war across Seoul's underworld. When Zayden Vale stumbled into the wrong nightclub on the worst night of his life, he met the most dangerous woman in Asia, and she decided he was hers. This is their story. Like this video, comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. And stay until the end, because what happens next will leave you breathless. Bosh. Rain hammered Seoul like punishment from above, each drop exploding against neon signs that bled red and electric blue across wet pavement. Zayden Vale stood outside the restaurant where his marriage had just died, watching couples drift past under umbrellas, their laughter cutting through him like glass. 32 years old, sharp-minded enough to build a career analyzing financial risk for multinational corporations. Stupid enough to miss every warning sign that his wife had been building an exit strategy for months. The anniversary dinner had started with champagne. It ended with Caroline calmly explaining that monogamy felt restrictive, that she had needs he couldn't fulfill, that she'd already found someone who understood her better. She said it all with the same tone she used to order takeout. Clinical, efficient, already moved on. "I'm not asking permission," she'd said, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. "I'm informing you of a decision I've already made." Zayden had sat there frozen, fork halfway to his mouth, while the restaurant hummed with celebration around them. 5 years of marriage, 3 years of trying for a family, she suddenly claimed she never wanted. Countless nights he'd worked late to afford the lifestyle she demanded. All of it reduced to this: his wife telling him she was keeping their apartment, keeping her new boyfriend, and expecting Zayden to adapt or leave. He left. Now he stood in the rain without an umbrella, watching his phone light up with messages from Caroline's lawyer. She'd already filed paperwork, already divided their assets in her favor, already won before he even knew they were fighting. The humiliation tasted like copper in his mouth. A taxi slowed beside him, the driver leaning across the passenger seat. "Where to?" Zayden stared at the old man's weathered face. Where did broken men go in a foreign city when home stopped being home? He'd moved to Seoul for Caroline's career 3 years ago, learned just enough Korean to survive, built a life around her ambitions. Now he had nowhere. "Somewhere loud," Zayden said, climbing into the back seat. "Somewhere I can disappear." The driver studied him in the rearview mirror. Soaked suit, hollow eyes, the unmistakable look of a man who'd just lost everything. He nodded once and pulled into traffic without another word. 20 minutes later, the taxi stopped in a district Zayden didn't recognize. Narrow streets, graffiti-tagged walls, buildings that leaned together like conspirators sharing secrets. The neon here pulsed darker, angrier, advertising things that happened after midnight when Seoul's polite mask came off. "Noir Vale," the driver said, pointing at a black door beneath a flickering crimson sign. "You wanted loud. That's loud." Zayden paid and stepped onto the rain-slicked sidewalk, staring at the club entrance. 2 men in black suits flanked the door, their eyes tracking every pedestrian like predators calculating threat levels. This wasn't a place that advertised. This was a place you found when you stopped caring about consequences. Perfect. He walked straight toward the door. The guards didn't move, just watched him approach with the flat expression of men who'd seen every kind of desperate walk through that entrance. One of them, built like he crushed concrete for cardio, stepped forward. "Members only." Zayden pulled out his wallet and extracted every bill he had, probably 300,000 won, money he'd pulled from the ATM for the anniversary dinner Caroline had ruined. He held it out without speaking. The guard looked at the cash, then at Zayden's face. Whatever he saw there made him step aside. "Don't start trouble," he said, "and don't touch anything that doesn't belong to you." Inside, Noir Vale swallowed light and exhaled smoke. The baseline hit like a physical force, vibrating through Zayden's chest as he descended stairs into a cavernous space carved beneath Seoul's streets. Crimson lighting bled across black leather booths where men in tailored suits conducted business over whiskey and violence. Women in designer dresses moved through the crowd like sharks, predatory and precise. This wasn't a nightclub. This was a hunting ground. Zayden pushed toward the bar, ignoring the stares that followed him. The only black man in a room full of Korean and Japanese faces, wearing a rain-soaked suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He didn't belong here, but he didn't belong anywhere anymore, so what difference did it make? The bartender, a woman with silver hair and facial piercings, raised an eyebrow. "What are you drinking?" "Everything." She poured whiskey without measuring, sliding the glass across polished obsidian. Zayden drank it in one swallow, feeling the burn all the way down. He gestured for another. "Rough night?" she asked, refilling his glass. "Rough life." Someone laughed nearby, sharp and mocking. Zayden turned to see a booth full of men in matching dark suits watching him like he was tonight's entertainment. One of them, younger than the rest with a scar cutting through his eyebrow, raised his glass in mock salute. "American," he called out in accented English. Zayden ignored him, turning back to his drink. "Hey, I'm talking to you." The bartender tensed, her hand moving beneath the counter. "Don't," she whispered to Zayden. "Those are Mori soldiers. Just ignore them." But Zayden was past caring about warnings. He'd spent 5 years ignoring his instincts, swallowing his pride, making himself smaller to fit into Caroline's perfect picture. Look where that got him. He turned to face the scarred man. "I'm not American. I'm just tired." "You look lost," the man continued, standing now. His friends shifted in their seats, sensing entertainment. "This isn't a place for tourists. Then it's a good thing I live here." The man's smile sharpened. "You have no idea where you are, do you?" Zayden drained his second whiskey and set the glass down with deliberate calm. "I'm in a club full of criminals trying to feel important by intimidating strangers. How close am I?" The room's temperature dropped. Conversations died. Even the music seemed to lower in volume. The scarred man took a step forward, his hand moving inside his jacket. "You want to repeat that?" "Yamato." The single word cut through the tension like a blade. Every head in the room turned toward the back corner, toward a booth elevated above the main floor, where shadows pooled thicker than anywhere else. The scarred man froze, his hand still inside his jacket. "Vesper Sama, sit down." The voice was female, low and controlled, carrying authority that made grown men flinch. The scarred man's face went white. He bowed deeply toward the shadowed booth, muttered something in rapid Japanese, and returned to his table like a scolded child. Zayden turned to look at whoever had just saved him from a knife in the ribs. The shadows moved. She emerged into the crimson light like something carved from marble in darkness. 30 years old, maybe. Korean features sharpened by ruthless genetics and expensive discipline. Black hair fell straight to her shoulders, framing a face that could have sold luxury cosmetics if it wasn't so terrifyingly cold. She wore a white silk blouse beneath a black blazer that probably cost more than Zayden's car, tailored so precisely it looked painted on. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath. Dark, infinite, completely empty of fear. She walked toward the bar with the precise grace of someone who knew every person in this room would kill for her without question. Men twice her size pressed themselves against walls to let her pass. The bartender straightened like a soldier at attention. And when she stopped directly in front of Zayden, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something dark and expensive like smoke and crushed flowers, the entire club held its breath. "You're sitting in my seat," she said. Zayden glanced at the bar stool beneath him, then back at her face. Up close, she was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, perfect skin, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. Everything about her screamed power, control, untouchable. "I don't see your name on it," he said. Someone behind them gasped. The bartender actually backed away. But the woman didn't react. She just studied Zayden with the same clinical focus he'd used to analyze a failing investment, measuring risk, calculating value, deciding whether he was worth the effort to destroy. Then, impossibly, something flickered behind those dead eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition of something familiar. "You're either very brave," she said quietly, "or very broken. Can it be both?" She tilted her head slightly, still watching him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "What's your name?" "Zayden Vale." "Where are you from, Zayden Vale?" "Nowhere? Everywhere? Does it matter?" Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Almost. "And what brings you to my club?" "Your club?" "Noir Vale belongs to me. Everything in it belongs to me, including that seat." Zayden should have apologized, should have moved, should have shown the same deference everyone else in this criminal cathedral was showing the woman who clearly ruled it. Instead, he looked directly into those infinite dark eyes and said, "Teach me how to stop caring." The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. But once they were out, hanging in the smoke-thick air between them, Zayden realized they were true. That's what he needed. Not revenge, not justice, just the ability to feel nothing, the way this woman clearly felt nothing, standing in a room full of killers like she was surrounded by houseplants. For the first time since she'd emerged from the shadows, real emotion crossed her face. Not anger, not amusement, something darker, something that looked almost like understanding. She studied him in silence, and Zayden got the distinct impression he was being measured for a coffin. Then she gestured to the bartender without breaking eye contact. "Close the VIP section. No interruptions." "Yes, Vesper-sama." The woman, Vesper, turned and walked toward the back of the club, toward a private elevator guarded by two more men in black suits. She didn't look back to see if Zayden would follow. He followed. The elevator rose in silence, glass walls revealing Seoul's glittering skyline as they climbed. Zayden watched the city spread beneath them, millions of lights marking millions of lives. Everyone down there living in a world that made sense. He used to be one of them. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood luxury as a weapon. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around three walls, offering a panoramic view of Seoul glowing in the rain. Black marble floors, minimal furniture, all sharp angles and expensive materials. Art on the walls that probably cost more than Zayden would earn in his lifetime. But no warmth, no photographs, no indication that anyone actually lived here. Vesper walked to a bar built into the far wall and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter. She handed one to Zayden without speaking, then moved to stand before the windows, silhouetted against the neon city. "You want to stop caring," she said, her back still turned. "Why?" "Because caring got me here." "And where is here?" "Drunk, homeless, standing in a penthouse with a woman whose name I don't even know, asking her to teach me how to become as cold as she is." She turned to face him, glass in hand. "My name is Ria Vesper. I own 12 legitimate businesses across Seoul and Tokyo. Hotels, mostly. Import-export. Real estate." She paused, sipping her whiskey. "I also control 17% of Seoul's black market distribution networks. Weapons, information, pharmaceuticals, services that powerful people need but can't request through official channels." Zayden absorbed this without flinching. "So you're a criminal. I'm a businesswoman who understands that power exists outside the law." Ria moved closer, each step deliberate. "Men who run this country's corporations shake my hand at charity galas while their assistants deposit money into my offshore accounts. Politicians who campaign on anti-corruption platforms pay me to bury evidence of their affairs. Everyone wants to pretend I don't exist, but when they need something done quietly, they come to me. And you help them. For a price." Zayden drank, feeling the expensive whiskey burn less than the cheap stuff downstairs. "So you're telling me this why? To impress me? Scare me?" "To answer your question." Ria stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her dark eyes. "You asked me to teach you how to stop caring. I'm explaining the cost. Because people like me, people who feel nothing, we didn't start that way. We became this because caring hurt too much." Something in her voice cracked the sentence in half, just barely, just enough that Zayden heard the truth hiding underneath. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. Ria's face went blank again, that perfect emotionless mask sliding back into place. "Wrong question. The right question is what happened to you?" She gestured to a black leather sofa. "Sit. Tell me why a well-dressed financial analyst walks into Seoul's most dangerous nightclub and asks a crime lord to teach him indifference." Zayden should have left. Should have recognized that this woman was a predator and he was already caught in her teeth. But sitting in Caroline's apartment would have been worse. Standing in the rain would have been worse. At least here, someone was actually looking at him. He sat. And then, because he had nothing left to lose, he told her everything. The marriage built on Caroline's ambition, the years spent supporting her career while his own stagnated. The pregnancy attempts that never worked, followed by her sudden announcement that she'd never wanted children anyway. The friends who'd slowly become her friends, leaving Zayden isolated in a foreign country. And finally, tonight, the anniversary dinner where she calmly explained that their marriage was already over. She'd just been waiting for the paperwork to be convenient. Rhea listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When Zayden finished, she refilled his glass. "Your wife is smart," Rhea said. "She built her exit strategy carefully, legally protected, financially secured. You probably won't keep the apartment, won't get alimony. She'll walk away with everything while you're left starting over at 32. I know. And you came to my club to what? Drown the pain? Find someone to hurt?" "I came to your club because I didn't know where else to go." Rhea studied him for a long moment. Then she did something Zayden didn't expect. She laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just a short, sharp sound of recognition, like she'd just seen something that reminded her of herself. "You're an idiot," she said, but there was no malice in it. "Walking into Noir Vale on the worst night of your life, insulting Mori soldiers, refusing to move from my seat. You could have been killed a dozen different ways. Would have solved a lot of problems. Self-pity is boring." Rhea set down her glass and moved to the windows, arms crossed. "You want to know how to stop caring? It's simple. You make a choice. You decide that nothing anyone else does will ever hurt you again. You build walls so high that nobody can climb them. You become so powerful that other people's opinions become irrelevant." "That's it? That's it." She turned to look at him. "But it costs everything, every friendship, every connection, every chance at being loved instead of feared. You become efficient, effective, untouchable, but you also become alone." Rain lashed against the windows, soul blurring into watercolor beyond the glass. "Sounds perfect," Zayden said. Rhea crossed the room and sat beside him on the sofa, close enough that he could feel heat radiating from her body despite the cold mask of her expression. "No, it sounds empty. And you're not empty yet, Zayden Vale. You're angry, you're hurt, but underneath all that, you're still hoping someone will prove your wife wrong. You don't know anything about me. I know you came here instead of fighting back. I know you let her take everything without raising your voice. I know you're sitting in my penthouse confessing your failures to a stranger because you're desperate for someone, anyone, to see you." She leaned closer, her perfume wrapping around him. "I know you because I used to be you." "Used to be?" "Before I learned better." Rhea stood abruptly, the moment of vulnerability slamming shut like a vault door. "You should go. My driver will take you wherever you need to be." Zayden didn't move. "What if I don't have anywhere to be?" "Then you'll find somewhere." "And if I want to stay?" The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Rhea's expression shifted, something predatory sliding behind her eyes, something that suggested she'd just been presented with a problem she wanted to solve. "Staying here is a bad idea," she said quietly. "Why?" "Because I don't do charity, and I don't do mercy. If you stay, it's because I've decided you're useful, and when I decide someone is useful, I tend to keep them." Zayden met her eyes. "Maybe I want to be kept." Rhea inhaled sharply. For the first time since they'd met, she looked genuinely unsettled, like he'd just said something that cracked her perfect control. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression hardened. "There's a guest room down the hall. Second door on the left. Use it tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss what happens next." She moved toward the elevator, already dismissing him. "Don't leave the penthouse. Don't touch anything. And don't make me regret this." The elevator doors closed before Zayden could respond. He sat in the vast silence of the penthouse, rain drumming against windows that overlooked a city where he no longer belonged, drinking whiskey that cost more than his monthly salary, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Caroline's lawyer with an attachment, divorce papers, already filed, already processed through some fast-track system her family's money had purchased. Sign and return within 48 hours, non-negotiable. Zayden stared at the screen, feeling nothing, which was either the whiskey or the first lesson Rhea had taught him. He found the guest room exactly where she said it would be. Minimalist, expensive, clinical. But the bed was soft and the door locked from the inside, which was more security than he'd felt in months. He collapsed onto the mattress, still wearing his rain-soaked suit, and closed his eyes. Somewhere in the penthouse, he heard movement. Water running, footsteps on marble, the sounds of someone else existing in this sterile, beautiful prison. Tomorrow, he would figure out what he just walked into. Tonight, he just needed to stop thinking. Zayden woke to sunlight burning through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, he forgot where he was. Then memory crashed back. The club, the penthouse, the woman who controlled both. Rhea. He found her in the kitchen, a space of black granite and chrome appliances that looked like it had never been used. She stood at the counter in silk pajamas and a black robe, drinking espresso while scrolling through a tablet. Without makeup, her face looked younger, almost vulnerable. Until she noticed him and the mask slammed back into place. "There's coffee," she said, not looking up. "Help yourself." Zayden poured a cup and leaned against the counter, studying her. In daylight, the penthouse looked even more soulless, beautiful but empty, like a luxury hotel room staged for photographs. No personal items, no clutter, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. "You meant what you said last night," Rhea said, still focused on her tablet, "about wanting to stay." "Did I say that?" "You said you wanted to be kept." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. "I'm giving you a chance to take it back. Blame the alcohol. Walk away. Pretend this never happened. And if I don't take it back?" Rhea set down the tablet with deliberate precision. "Then you need to understand what you're agreeing to. I don't do relationships. I don't do romance. I collect useful people the way other women collect shoes. If you stay, it's because you serve a purpose." "What purpose?" "I haven't decided yet." She moved closer, examining him the way someone might examine an interesting sculpture. "You're educated, financially literate, foreign, which makes you invisible to Soul's criminal networks. Nobody knows you. Nobody expects you. That makes you valuable. You want to use me. I want to see if you're worth using." Rhea circled him slowly. "Your wife took everything because you let her. You came to my club because you had nowhere else to go. You're weak, Zayden. Broken. Most men in my world would see that as a reason to discard you. But not you." She stopped directly in front of him. "Broken things can be reforged, made stronger, more dangerous." Her hand lifted, fingers trailing along his jaw. "The question is whether you're willing to burn hot enough." Zayden's breath caught. Her touch was cold, clinical, but the promise behind it wasn't. "What are you offering?" he asked. "Protection. Resources. A place to exist while you figure out what comes next. In exchange, you become mine. You work for me. You go where I send you. You do what I tell you. And when I'm done with you, you leave quietly." "That's it?" "That's it." Rhea's hand dropped away. "I'm not offering happiness, Zayden. I'm offering purpose. Take it or leave it." He should have left, should have recognized this as exactly what it was. A billionaire crime lord collecting another broken toy to add to her shelf. But the alternative was crawling back to Caroline's apartment and begging for a place to sleep while she fucked her new boyfriend in their bed. "I'll stay," Zayden said. Rhea smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just won a negotiation. "Good." She returned to her tablet, already moving on. "My assistant will bring you clothes. You'll move into the East Wing. Don't go into my office or my bedroom. Don't speak to anyone about who I am or what I do. And for your own safety, don't develop feelings." "Feelings? For me? For this situation? For whatever fantasy you're building in your head about what this is?" She met his eyes. "I will hurt you, Zayden. Not because I want to, but because that's what I do. I hurt everyone who gets close, so keep your distance and we'll both survive this intact." Zayden nodded slowly, absorbing the warning. "Understood. We'll see." The rest of the day unfolded like a fever dream. Rhea's assistant, a severe woman named Minseo, who spoke flawless English and radiated disapproval, arrived with enough designer clothing to fill Zayden's new closet. Everything fit perfectly, tailored to measurements Minseo must have taken while he slept. Rhea disappeared into her office and didn't emerge for hours. Zayden explored the penthouse, finding rooms he hadn't noticed the night before. A library filled with first editions and legal textbooks. a home gym that looked professionally maintained, a walk-in wine cellar that probably cost more than most people's houses. And everywhere, the same clinical emptiness, the same absence of personal history. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress disguised as luxury. That evening, Ria called him into her office, a massive space dominated by windows and a desk that looked carved from a single piece of obsidian. She sat behind it like a queen on a throne, reviewing contracts with the focused intensity of someone who trusted nothing. "Sit," she said, not looking up. Zayden sat in the leather chair across from her. "Your wife filed for divorce." Ria slid a folder across the desk. "I had my lawyers review the paperwork. It's aggressive. She's claiming you abandoned the marriage, that you refused counseling, that you were emotionally unavailable." "All lies. Doesn't matter. What matters is she's positioned herself as the victim. If you sign these papers, you lose everything. Apartment, savings, even your work visa is complicated." Zayden's chest tightened. "I know. So don't sign." He looked up sharply. "What?" Ria leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Fight her. Make her prove every allegation. Drag this out until she realizes the cost isn't worth it. I can't afford lawyers who could—" "You can now." Ria's smile turned predatory. "I told you I collect useful people. Consider this an investment in your usefulness. My legal team will handle everything. You do exactly what they tell you, and when this is over, your wife will realize she picked a fight with the wrong man." Zayden stared at her, trying to understand the angle. "Why would you do this?" "Because I can. Because watching powerful people lose is entertaining, and because—" She paused, something flickering across her expression. "Because nobody should be able to take everything from you without a fight." The last sentence carried weight that suggested personal history. But before Zayden could ask, Ria stood, ending the conversation. "There's a gala tomorrow night. Legitimate business. Boring people pretending to care about charity. You'll attend as my guest." "Why?" "Because I'm introducing you to Seoul's elite society. If you're going to exist in my world, you need to be seen, need to be accepted, need to become invisible through visibility." She moved to the window, watching the city pulse below. "And because I want your wife to hear about it. I want her to wonder who you've become. Who's protecting you now?" "This isn't about helping me, is it?" Zayden said quietly. "This is about power. About proving you can take something she thought she owned and remake it into something that scares her." Ria turned to face him, and for just a moment her mask slipped. "Yes," she said simply. "Welcome to my world, Zayden. It's built entirely on fear." That night, lying in his new bed in the east wing of Ria's sterile palace, Zayden realized he'd made a deal with someone far more dangerous than his wife could ever be. Caroline had broken his heart, but Ria Vesper was about to rebuild him into a weapon, and he had no idea whether that made him lucky or already dead. The gala sparkled like a lie wrapped in champagne and diamonds. Zayden stood at the entrance of the Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom, watching Seoul's elite society perform the careful dance of power disguised as charity. Women in gowns that cost more than his yearly salary, men in tuxedos discussing mergers between sips of wine, everyone smiling, everyone lying. Ria stood beside him in a black dress that looked painted onto her body, her hair swept up to reveal a neck adorned with diamonds that probably had their own security detail. She looked untouchable. Perfect. Every inch the billionaire heiress these people expected to see. "Stay close," she said without looking at him. "Smile when introduced. Say nothing intelligent. Let them underestimate you." "That's the strategy?" "That's survival." She moved forward into the crowd and Zayden followed, watching how the room parted for her like water around a blade. Within minutes, they were surrounded. Business executives with calculating eyes, politicians with practiced smiles, society wives who assessed Zayden the way someone might assess a new purse Ria had purchased. Vesper C., a heavy-set man in an expensive tuxedo, approached, his Korean flawless, but his eyes cold. "What a surprise to see you at such wholesome events." Ria's smile could have cut glass. "Chairman Park, still pretending your pharmaceutical company doesn't route half its inventory through my distribution network?" The man's face flushed. Several nearby conversations stopped. "I don't know what you're—" "Of course you don't. Ria touched Zayden's arm possessively. This is Zayden Vale, my guest, my associate, soon to be my business partner in several ventures. She let the implication hang. I trust you'll extend him the same respect you extend me. Chairman Park's eyes narrowed, calculating this new variable. Then he bowed slightly. Of course. Welcome to Seoul, Mr. Vale. Zayden nodded, saying nothing, letting them wonder. This happened 6 more times in the next hour. Introductions that felt like territorial marking, conversations that danced around threats disguised as pleasantries. And through it all, Ria kept Zayden close, her hand occasionally finding his arm, his back, his shoulder. Marking him. Claiming him. Broadcasting ownership. They were near the bar when Zayden saw her, Caroline. She stood 20 feet away in a red dress that Zayden had never seen before, laughing at something a tall Korean man in a designer suit was whispering in her ear. The man looked familiar. Probably someone from her company, someone she'd mentioned in passing while Zayden wasn't paying attention. Zayden's throat went dry. Ria followed his gaze and went very still. That's her. It wasn't a question. Yeah. The man? Don't know. Probably him, the one she mentioned. Caroline must have felt their stares because she turned, and her eyes went wide when she saw Zayden. Shock rippled across her face. Shock that he was here, at this exclusive event, standing beside Ria Vesper. Then her expression hardened into something ugly. She whispered to her companion and started walking directly toward them. This should be interesting, Ria murmured. Let me handle it. Ria, trust me. Caroline stopped 3 feet away, her smile bright and venomous. Zayden, what a surprise! Her eyes flicked to Ria with barely concealed hostility. I didn't know you were networking. Caroline, Zayden forced his voice steady. You look well. I am well. Very well, actually. She gestured to the man beside her. This is Director Choi Min-jun, from my office. We've been working very closely together. The implication hung between them like a knife. Ria stepped forward slightly, her body language shifting from polite to predatory. How lovely. Working relationships that cross into personal territory can be so complicated, legally speaking. Her smile widened. I'm Ria Vesper. Perhaps you've heard of me. Caroline's confidence flickered. Yes. Of course. The hotel heiress. Among other things, Ria's hand found Zayden's lower back, the touch possessive and deliberate. Zayden and I have also been working closely together, very closely. He's proven remarkably useful. The air between the 4 of them crackled with tension. Caroline's face flushed. I see you've wasted no time finding someone to take care of you. How typical. Caroline, Zayden started. No, let her speak, Ria interrupted, her voice dropping to something dangerous. Please, continue explaining how the man you discarded like trash isn't allowed to rebuild his life. I didn't discard... You filed for divorce before your anniversary dinner even ended. You claimed abandonment when he'd spent 5 years supporting your career. You're attempting to take his home, his savings, everything he built. Ria took 1 step closer, and Caroline actually backed up. So yes, please tell me more about how he's the problem. Caroline's face went pale. How do you know that... Oh, I know everything, Mrs. Vale. It's what I do. Ria's smile turned arctic. And I've taken a particular interest in your husband's situation. My legal team finds it fascinating. So many discrepancies in your filing. Director Choi touched Caroline's arm. Maybe we should... No. Caroline's voice shook slightly. Zayden, I don't know what game you're playing, but dragging her into our marriage... There is no marriage, Zayden said quietly, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. You ended it, remember? Over dessert. I asked for space, for honesty. I'm the one who left when you told me you'd already replaced me. Zayden felt Ria's hand press gently against his back, grounding him. You don't get to rewrite history just because you don't like how the story ended. Caroline's eyes glistened with what might have been real tears or calculated performance. I never thought you'd become this, cold, cruel, parading around with someone like her, someone like me? Ria's voice could have frozen blood. Please, elaborate. The ballroom around them had gone quiet. People pretended to look elsewhere while absolutely listening to every word. Caroline seemed to realize she'd crossed a line. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant exactly what you said. Ria stepped back, her hand sliding away from Zayden. Enjoy your evening, Mrs. Vale. I'm sure your legal team will be in touch soon. Mine certainly will be. She turned and walked away, and Zayden followed without another word, leaving Caroline standing there with fury and confusion warring across her face. Outside on the hotel balcony, overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, Ria gripped the marble railing so hard her knuckles went white. That was reckless, she said. You're the one who threatened her. I didn't threaten. I promised. Ria turned to face him, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked genuinely angry. Do you understand what you've done? What I just did in there? You defended me. I declared war. Her eyes blazed. In front of half of Seoul's business elite, I made it clear that you're under my protection. That means anyone who comes after you comes after me. That means your wife's divorce isn't a private matter anymore. It's a public challenge. Zayden absorbed this. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to. The moment you stayed in my penthouse, the moment you let me dress you and parade you in front of these vultures, you made a choice. She moved closer, her anger transforming into something else, something that looked almost like fear. Your wife isn't just some corporate executive, Zayden. Her family has connections, money, influence, and now I've publicly humiliated her. So what happens now? Now she either backs down or escalates. Ria's laugh was bitter. And women like her never back down. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered over the city, turning Seoul's lights into blurred stars. We should go, Ria said, before this gets worse. But it was already worse. They found out the next morning when Min Seo arrived at the penthouse looking like she'd witnessed a murder. She handed Ria a tablet without speaking. Zayden watched Ria's face drain of color as she read. What is it? Your wife's family filed a formal complaint with the Korean Financial Services Commission. Ria's voice was flat. They're claiming you've been funneling money through my businesses, that our relationship is a cover for financial fraud. That's insane. I've never touched your... It doesn't matter, the accusation is public. It's in 3 major newspapers. They're calling for an investigation. She threw the tablet across the room, where it shattered against the wall. Fuck! Zayden had never heard her curse before, never seen her lose control. Can they actually... They can make my life very difficult. Freeze accounts, audit businesses, tie me up in legal proceedings for months. Ria paced like a caged animal. This is retaliation. Your wife wants to hurt you by destroying me. Then let me go. I'll leave. I'll sign whatever she... No. The word came out sharp enough to cut. You sign nothing. You leave when I say you can leave. Ria, get out. She pointed toward the door. Now. Before I say something I regret. Zayden retreated to the east wing, heart hammering. Through the walls, he heard things breaking, glass shattering, Ria unleashing fury on a world that had dared to challenge her. He'd done this, brought chaos into her carefully controlled empire. 3 hours later, Min Seo knocked on his door. Vesper Nim wants to see you. He found Ria in her office, surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits. They looked at Zayden like he was a particularly virulent disease. Sit, Ria said. He sat. Here's the situation, one of the lawyers began. A woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. The complaint is baseless but strategic. They're not trying to win. They're trying to tie up Vesper Industries in enough red tape that I become a liability, Ria interrupted. That business partners start questioning my judgment. That my reputation, built on being untouchable, suddenly shows cracks. Zayden felt sick. I'm sorry. I should have... You should have what? Not existed? Not let your wife destroy you? Ria's eyes were bloodshot like she hadn't slept. This isn't your fault, Zayden. It's mine. I let emotion override strategy. I wanted to hurt her for hurting you, and I forgot that people like us don't get to be human without consequences. People like us? Broken people pretending to be powerful. She stood, dismissing the lawyers with a gesture. They filed out silently, leaving Zayden and Ria alone. The office felt too big, too empty. I'm going to fix this, Ria said quietly. But it's going to get ugly. Your wife declared war. I'm going to finish it. How? She looked at him for a long moment. By doing what I do best, finding leverage, applying pressure, making people disappear. Ria, not literally, metaphorically. Her smile was cold. Your wife thinks she knows power because her family has money. She has no idea what real power looks like, but she's about to learn. Over the next 2 weeks, Zayden watched Ria orchestrate destruction with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a warlord. Caroline's company lost 3 major contracts overnight, all coincidence, all perfectly legal. But everyone in Seoul's business community understood the message. Director Choi Min-jun, Caroline's new boyfriend, found himself under investigation for embezzlement. Evidence materialized from nowhere. His career collapsed in 72 hours. The newspaper that published the financial fraud allegations received anonymous tips about their own questionable practices. Within a week, their editor resigned. And Caroline's family, the ones who'd filed the formal complaint, discovered that someone had purchased their largest debts. Someone who was now demanding immediate payment. That someone was Ria. Zayden watched it happen from inside the penthouse, simultaneously horrified and fascinated. This was what Ria had meant. This was the cost of her protection, total annihilation. But something else was happening too, something neither of them had planned for. They started having breakfast together. Not because Min-seo scheduled it, because they wanted to. Ria began asking him questions about his work, his past, his thoughts on things unrelated to revenge. Zayden found himself staying up late in her library, reading books she recommended, leaving notes and margins for her to find. One night, he cooked dinner. Just pasta and wine, nothing fancy. But Ria sat at the kitchen counter watching him work, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked relaxed. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I like cooking." "That's not what I mean." She swirled wine in her glass. "You don't have to try to make this domestic. I told you what I am." "Maybe I don't care what you told me." Zayden plated the pasta and set it in front of her. "Maybe I'm starting to see who you actually are." "And who's that?" "Someone who's scared she might actually feel something." Ria's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then she just laughed. A real laugh, not the cold performance she used in public. "You're an idiot," she said. "So you keep telling me." They ate in comfortable silence, and somewhere between the wine and the late hour their knees touched under the counter. Neither of them moved away. The shift happened so gradually that Zayden almost missed it. The way Ria started touching him more, casual brushes of her hand against his arm, her fingers adjusting his collar before meetings. The way she listened when he talked, really listened, instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. And the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Like he was a puzzle she desperately wanted to solve but was terrified of the answer. Min-seo noticed. Her disapproval radiated like heat. "You're playing a dangerous game," she told Zayden one morning when Ria was out. "Vesper Nim doesn't do attachment. Everyone who's tried has been discarded." "I'm not trying anything." "Aren't you?" Min-seo's eyes were sharp. "You cook for her, make her laugh. She's different around you, softer, and that makes her vulnerable. In her world, vulnerability gets you killed." Maybe her world is wrong. Her world is all she has. And when she realizes you're making her weak, she'll cut you out like cancer. It's what she does. It's what she has to do to survive. The warning sat heavy in Zayden's chest, but he couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. Because somewhere between revenge and protection, between contractual usefulness and genuine connection, something real had started growing in the sterile luxury of Ria's fortress. And he was pretty sure she felt it too. The confrontation came 3 weeks after the gala. Zayden found Ria on the penthouse terrace at midnight, staring at Seoul's endless lights while rain began to fall. She wore silk pajamas and held a glass of whiskey in trembling hands. "Caroline withdrew the complaint," she said without turning around. "Her family's backing down. Director Choi disappeared, probably fled to Singapore or Tokyo. Your divorce is proceeding on terms favorable to you. You'll keep your savings. Your visa is secure." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were raw. "You're free, Zayden. You can leave." His heart stopped. "What?" "That was the deal. I protect you until the threat is gone. The threat is gone. She turned back to the city. Minseo will help you find an apartment. I'll provide references for employment. You'll be fine. You're throwing me out. I'm releasing you. There's a difference. Is there? Zayden moved closer, rain soaking through his shirt. Because it feels like you're running away. I don't run from anything. No. You just destroy it before it can hurt you. He grabbed her shoulder, forcing her to face him. What are you scared of, Rhea? I'm not. Bullshit. You've spent 3 weeks systematically destroying everyone who threatened me. You've let me into parts of your life nobody else sees. You laugh at my jokes. You ask about my day. And now that the danger's over, now that you actually have to deal with what's happening between us, you're kicking me out. There's nothing happening between us. Then why are your hands shaking? Rhea looked down at the glass, trembling in her grip. She set it down on the terrace railing with deliberate care. Because I'm angry. At who? At you. At myself. At the fact that you came into my club asking me to teach you how to stop caring, and instead you've made me start caring about every... She stopped, breathing hard. I don't do this, Zayden. I don't feel things. I don't need people. And you're making me... Making you what? Making me hope. The confession came out broken. Making me think that maybe I could be something other than what my father built. Something other than fear and power and isolation. And that's dangerous. That's how people like me get destroyed. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain fell harder, soaking them both. Zayden stepped closer, close enough to see gold flecks in her dark eyes, close enough to feel heat radiating from her skin despite the cold rain. What if I don't want to leave? He said quietly. Then you're an idiot. We've established that. Zayden, what if I stay not because you're useful, but because I actually want to be here? With you? What if the past 3 weeks weren't about revenge or protection, but about two broken people finding something real in the wreckage? Rhea's breath hitched. That's not... Isn't it? His hand found her face, thumb brushing water from her cheekbone. You said you don't do relationships, don't do romance, don't do feelings. But you're feeling something right now, Rhea. I can see it, and it's terrifying you. Everything about you terrifies me. The admission came out as a whisper. You make me want things I can't have. Make me imagine futures that don't exist for people like me. What if they could exist? They can't. But her hand covered his where it rested against her face, holding it there like an anchor. You don't understand what you're asking for. My world is violence and strategy and constant war. Anyone close to me becomes a target, a weakness. They either betray me or get killed protecting me. There's no happy ending here. I'm not asking for happy, I'm asking for real. Lightning illuminated the skyline behind them, turning Seoul into a city of shadows and silver. If you stay, Rhea said, her voice shaking, if we do this, whatever this is, I will hurt you eventually. I will push you away, test you, try to break you before you can break me. It's what I do. It's all I know how to do. Then teach me how to survive it. Zayden, he kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively. He kissed her the way someone kisses when they've been falling for weeks and just realized there's no ground beneath them anymore. Desperate, consuming, real. For one breathless second, Rhea went rigid. Then she surrendered, her hands fisted in his wet shirt, pulling him closer. Her mouth opened against his, tasting like whiskey and rain, and 3 weeks of tension finally breaking. She kissed him back with the same ferocity she applied to everything. Total commitment, no half measures, burning hot enough to leave scars. They broke apart breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, rain falling around them like the world was washing away. This is a mistake, Rhea whispered. Probably. We're going to destroy each other. Maybe. I don't know how to do this. How to be, soft, vulnerable, human. Then we'll figure it out together. Zayden's thoughts framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are, Rhea. I'm asking you to let me see all of it. The power, the darkness, the parts you think make you unlovable. Let me decide what I can handle. Tears mixed with rain on her face. And if I can't? If I ruin this like I ruin everything? Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But right now, in this moment, I'm here. I'm choosing you. Stop running from that. Rhea exhaled shakily, Then she kissed him again, softer this time, like she was memorizing the shape of something she was sure she'd lose. When they finally pulled apart, Seoul glittered beneath them. A city of millions, all with their own wars, their own broken pieces, their own desperate attempts to find something worth keeping. Stay, Rhea whispered against his lips. Not because I'm useful, not because you owe me. Stay because you want to. I want to. Even knowing what I am, especially knowing what you are. She smiled then, a real smile, small and fragile and so beautiful it hurt to look at. You're an idiot, Zayden Vale. So you keep telling me. They stood in the rain, holding each other while the storm raged and Seoul pulsed below, and neither of them mentioned that they'd just crossed a line there was no coming back from. That somewhere in the past 3 weeks, protection had become possession. Usefulness had become need. And two people who'd been teaching each other how to stop caring had accidentally fallen into something that looked dangerously close to love. But love in Rhea's world came with a price, and they were about to discover exactly how high that price could climb. The attack came 2 days later, swift and brutal, when Zayden was alone. He'd been working at one of Rhea's legitimate companies, a hotel management firm where she'd placed him as a financial consultant. The work was easy, mindless, a cover more than a career, but it got him out of the penthouse, gave him purpose beyond being Rhea's, whatever he was now. He left the office at 6, the sun already setting over Seoul's crowded streets. The subway was packed, bodies pressed together in the rush hour crush. Zayden found a spot near the doors, checking his phone. A message from Rhea. Dinner at 8. Don't be late. He smiled, typing back a response. Didn't notice the two men in black jackets moving closer until it was too late. The subway lurched to a stop. Doors opened. Hands grabbed Zayden from behind, shoving him onto the platform with enough force to send his phone clattering across tile. He stumbled, trying to turn, trying to see. Something hard cracked across the back of his skull. The world tilted. Hands dragged him through the crowd. People looked away, sensing danger, choosing survival over intervention. A van, black, unmarked. They threw him inside. The last thing Zayden saw before the doors slammed shut was Seoul's neon skyline blurring into darkness. Then nothing. He woke to the smell of rust and ocean salt, his head pounding, hands zip-tied behind his back. Concrete floor, metal walls. The distant sound of water lapping against a dock. A warehouse. Abandoned, judging by the decay. Zayden's vision swam as he forced himself upright. Blood dripped from where they'd hit him, warm and sticky down his neck. Footsteps echoed across the warehouse. 3 men emerged from the shadows. 2 he didn't recognize, muscle, probably. The third made his blood freeze. Older, Japanese, expensive suit, eyes that held the flat calm of someone who'd watched people die and felt nothing. Zayden Vale, the man said in accented English. You're more trouble than you look. Who are you? My name is Mori Takeshi. Perhaps Vesper has mentioned me. Zayden's mind raced. Mori, the syndicate, the rivals Rhea had crushed to protect him. She mentioned you were eliminated. Mori smiled. Eliminated from Seoul, yes, driven back to Osaka, but not destroyed, never destroyed. He crouched in front of Zayden, studying him like an interesting insect. Tell me something. What makes you worth starting a war over? I don't know what... Don't play stupid. Rhea Vesper doesn't care about anyone, doesn't protect anyone, doesn't show weakness. Yet she burned half my operations to the ground because we threatened you. So I'll ask again. What makes you special? Zayden's throat went dry. Nothing. I'm nobody. Wrong answer. Mori stood, nodding to his men. One of them grabbed Zayden's hair, yanking his head back. The other produced a knife, pressing the blade against his throat. Here's what's going to happen, Mori said calmly. I'm going to call Rhea Vesper. I'm going to tell her that I have you, and I'm going to offer her a choice. Give me back the territory she stole, or receive your body in pieces. She won't. She will, because you've made her weak, human, emotional, all the things her father spent years beating out of her. Mori pulled out a phone. She'll destroy herself trying to save you, and when she's broken, vulnerable, ruined, I'll take everything she has left. The knife pressed harder. Blood welled against the blade. Any last words before I make this call? Zayden met Mori's eyes. Yeah, you have no idea what you just started. Maury laughed. We'll see. The phone rang once, twice. Then Ria's voice, cold and controlled. Who is this? Hello, Vesper. It's been too long. Silence. Then barely audible. Maury. I have something of yours. Or should I say someone? More silence. But Zayden could hear her breathing change, faster, shallower. Fear. If you've hurt him? I haven't. Yet. But I will if you don't listen very carefully. Maury began listing his demands. Territory, money, public acknowledgement that he'd beaten her. Zayden stopped listening. Because through the phone, across the distance, he heard something that made his heart stop. Ria was crying, not sobbing, not breaking down, just small, sharp breaths that betrayed absolute panic. The most feared woman in Seoul was terrified because of him. You have 12 hours, Maury said. Agree to my terms, or I start sending pieces. Understand? I understand. Ria's voice had gone flat. Empty. The same tone she'd used when talking about her father. But Maury, you need to understand something too. What's that? There are no pieces left of you to send back. The line went dead. Maury stared at the phone, then at Zayden, then back at the phone. She's bluffing. But one of his men, the one with the knife, looked nervous. Vesper Sama doesn't bluff. She's one woman. We have... The warehouse lights died. Complete darkness. Then, from somewhere in the black, gunfire, screaming metal, bodies hitting concrete, Maury shouting orders in Japanese. Zayden threw himself sideways, rolling away from where he'd been sitting. His zip-tied hands made it awkward, clumsy, but movement was survival. More gunfire. Muzzle flashes illuminating chaos in strobe light bursts. Someone grabbed Zayden's collar, dragging him toward... Light exploded. Fire bloomed across the warehouse as something detonated near the entrance. Through the flames, through the smoke, and screaming, Zayden saw her. Ria. She moved through the warehouse like vengeance wearing human skin. Black tactical gear beneath a torn white blouse, blood splattered across her face. Her eyes locked onto Zayden with laser focus, and everything else became background noise. She reached him in seconds, producing a knife and cutting his zip ties with shaking hands. Are you hurt? Her voice cracked. Zayden, are you... I'm fine, we need to... Ayy! An explosion rocked the warehouse. The ceiling groaned, metal beams buckling. Ria grabbed his hand. Run! They sprinted toward the exit as the building collapsed behind them, fire consuming everything, turning the warehouse into an inferno. Bullets whined past. Someone screamed. They burst through the warehouse doors just as the entire structure detonated. The shockwave threw them onto wet pavement. Ria twisted midair, shielding Zayden with her own body as debris rained from the sky. They landed hard. Zayden's ears rang. His lungs burned. Above them, the warehouse had become a pillar of fire reaching toward the black soul sky. Ria rolled off him, gasping, her hands immediately finding his face. You're alive, she whispered. You're alive, you're... Then she was kissing him, desperate, frantic, tasting like smoke and blood and absolute terror. When she pulled back, tears cut clean tracks through the soot on her face. I thought I lost you, she said. I thought, I'm here, I'm okay. No. She gripped his face harder. You're not okay. None of this is okay. This is what I meant, Zayden. This is what happens to people who stay close to me. They become targets, they get hurt, Ria. He covered her shaking hands with his. I'm still here. Sirens wailed in the distance. The warehouse burned. Somewhere in the flames, Maury's men were dying. And kneeling in the ashes, with soul glowing behind them and destruction ahead, Ria Vesper looked at Zayden Vale like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just shattered. Marry me, she said. Zayden's brain stuttered. What? Marry me. Her voice shook, but her eyes were clear. Because I just burned a syndicate to the ground for you. Because I can't breathe when you're in danger. Because somewhere between revenge and protection, I fell in love with you, and I don't know how to stop. Ria, I know it's insane. I know we've only known each other for a month. I know I'm dangerous and broken, and everything about this is wrong. But I'm asking anyway. Because if tonight taught me anything, it's that I can't survive losing you. Rain began to fall, mixing with smoke, turning the air thick and gray. Zayden stared at the woman who'd saved him, destroyed for him, just confessed to loving him while covered in blood and ash. And he realized the answer had been inevitable from the moment he sat in her seat at Noir Vale. "Yes," he said. Rhea blinked. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, because I'm already in too deep to care about insane, because you're the first thing that's felt real in years, because I love you too, and that scares me less than the thought of walking away." She kissed him again, softer this time, like a promise. Behind them, the warehouse collapsed completely, sending sparks spiraling into the soul night. And somewhere in the city, in boardrooms and nightclubs and back alleys where power moved like water, word began to spread. Rhea Vesper had chosen someone, protected someone, loved someone. The Queen of Souls underworld had just shown the world her only weakness, and everyone knew, from her enemies to her allies to the people who served her, that nothing would ever be the same again. The safe house smelled like disinfectant and old concrete. Rhea's people had moved them there within the hour, a nondescript apartment in Gangnam's business district where nobody asked questions and security cameras had convenient blind spots. Zayden sat on a utilitarian sofa while a Dr. Rhea kept on retainer stitched the gash on his scalp, her hands steady despite the chaos they'd just escaped. Rhea paced like a caged animal, phone pressed to her ear, barking orders in rapid Korean. Her white blouse was ruined, torn, and blood-stained. She'd stripped off the tactical vest, but still wore the black cargo pants, looking like some beautiful nightmare caught between two worlds. When the doctor finished and left, Rhea finally stopped moving. She stood at the window overlooking Seoul's nighttime traffic, her back rigid, hands clenched into fists. "We can't stay here long," she said quietly. "Mori's people will regroup. They'll come harder next time." "How many did you kill back there?" "Not enough." She turned to face him, and her eyes were hollow. "Mori escaped. I saw him slip out the back while the building burned, which means this isn't over." Zayden's chest tightened. "You said you'd finish it." "I tried. I brought 20 men, demolished his entire operation in Seoul. But he's like a cancer. You think you've cut it all out and it metastasizes somewhere else." She crossed to the makeshift bar and poured whiskey with shaking hands. "He'll go back to Osaka. Rebuild. Come at us again when we're vulnerable." "So what do we do?" Rhea drained her glass in one swallow. "We get married, publicly, quickly. Make it official that you're under my protection permanently." She poured another drink. "And then we fortify. Move to my estate in the mountains, tighten security, wait for the next attack, and pray we're ready for it." "That's not a life, Rhea. That's a prison. It's survival." She slammed the glass down hard enough that it cracked. "You think I want this? You think I want to spend every moment wondering if today's the day someone puts a bullet in your head to hurt me? Then let me go. End this before—" "I can't!" The confession came out broken. "I tried, remember? After we destroyed Caroline's complaint, I told you to leave, and you kissed me instead. You made me hope for something I can't have, and now I'm in too deep to let you walk away." Zayden stood, crossing to where she stood trembling with rage and fear. "Then stop treating this like a war you're fighting alone. Let me help." "How? You're not a soldier. You're not—" "I'm the man you just proposed to while covered in blood and ash." He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "So stop protecting me like I'm fragile and start trusting me like I'm your partner." Something shifted in Rhea's expression. The fear didn't disappear, but it made room for something else, something that looked almost like hope. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "Then show me." She kissed him instead of answering, and this time there was no gentleness in it, just raw need, desperation, the aftermath of violence translating into something equally consuming. Zayden kissed her back just as hard, tasting whiskey and smoke, feeling her body shake against his. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Rhea's eyes were wet. "We'll do it tomorrow," she said. "The wedding. Small. Private. Just witnesses and paperwork. Nothing that can be attacked or used against us." "Tomorrow? The longer we wait, the more time Mori has to strike. The more time my enemies have to see weakness and exploit it." Her hands fisted in his shirt. "I need you legally mine, Zayden. Need the protection that marriage provides in Korean law. Need every avenue covered before the next attack comes. Okay. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Tomorrow. You're insane for agreeing to this. So you keep telling me. She almost smiled. Almost. They spent that night wrapped around each other on the safe house's narrow bed, neither of them sleeping, both hyper-aware that the warehouse fire had announced their relationship to every criminal organization in Seoul. By morning, the entire underworld would know that Rhea Vesper had burned men alive to protect someone, that she was compromised, vulnerable, human, and in their world, human meant weak. The wedding happened in a government office in Seocho district at 11 the next morning. No flowers, no guests, just Min Seo as witness, 2 lawyers Rhea kept on permanent retainer, and a clerk who looked bored enough to suggest this was just another Tuesday. Rhea wore black, always black, a tailored suit that made her look like she was attending a funeral instead of a wedding. Zayden wore clothes Min Seo had acquired overnight, everything fitting perfectly because Rhea's people were nothing if not efficient. The ceremony took 8 minutes. They signed documents in triplicate. The clerk stamped papers with bureaucratic indifference. Min Seo handed over an envelope thick with cash, processing fees and discretionary bonuses to ensure this marriage stayed quiet until Rhea decided to announce it. When the clerk pronounced them legally married, Rhea didn't kiss him, just nodded once, collected the marriage certificate, and walked out into Seoul's gray morning. Zayden followed, feeling like he'd just participated in a business transaction rather than a wedding. That was romantic, he said as they climbed into the armored SUV waiting outside. Rhea glanced at him, something unreadable flickering across her face. Romance is a luxury. This was strategic necessity. Is that what you're telling yourself? It's what I'm telling you. But her hand found his in the back seat, fingers interlacing with desperate pressure. We'll have the real ceremony later, when this is over, when it's safe. Something with flowers and music and all the meaningless gestures people pretend matter. But not now. Not now. The SUV accelerated into traffic, flanked by 2 more vehicles filled with Rhea's security. They drove in silence through Seoul's crowded streets, heading toward the mountain estate where Rhea planned to fortress them against the coming storm. Zayden watched the city blur past, wondering when his life had become something that required armored convoys and armed guards. 3 months ago, he'd been a financial analyst worried about quarterly reports. Now he was married to a crime lord fleeing assassination attempts, living in safe houses. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Vale. I look forward to meeting your widow. Zayden showed Rhea the screen. Her face went white. Maury. How did he get my number? He has resources, connections. She took the phone, deleted the message, then removed the battery entirely. We're going dark. No phones, no digital footprint, nothing he can track. For how long? As long as it takes. The estate materialized from mountain mist like something out of a ghost story. Traditional Korean architecture blended with modern security, stone walls topped with cameras, gardens patrolled by men in tactical gear, gates that looked decorative but could probably stop a tank. Inside, the main house was all dark wood and paper screens, beautiful and cold. Rhea gave Zayden a brief tour, master bedroom, guest rooms, the panic room disguised as a library, escape routes built into the walls. You've planned for sieges before, Zayden observed. My father built this place. He understood that power makes you a target. Rhea paused in the main living area, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. I grew up here. Every happy memory I have happened somewhere else. What happened here? Training, discipline, lessons about what happens when you show weakness. She turned away. I swore I'd never bring anyone I cared about to this place. But here we are. Zayden wanted to comfort her, but Min Seo appeared before he could, her expression grim. Vesper Nim, we have a problem. They followed her to a converted bedroom that served as a command center. Multiple screens showed news feeds, security footage, financial data. One screen displayed a frozen image that made Rhea's breath catch. Caroline. She stood outside a police station in downtown Seoul, flanked by lawyers and what looked like reporters. The timestamp read 30 minutes ago. Min Seo unmuted the feed. Filing formal charges against Rhea Vesper and her organization, Caroline was saying, her voice steady and cold. Evidence has come to light suggesting my estranged husband was coerced into their relationship through threats, intimidation, and financial manipulation. Furthermore, we have documentation linking Vesper Industries to the warehouse explosion last night that killed 7 people. Zayden felt the floor tilt. What? Ria's face had gone blank, completely empty. Caroline continued, I'm calling for a full investigation into Vesper's criminal activities and requesting immediate protective custody for Zayden Vale, who I believe is being held against his will. The feed cut to a news anchor discussing the allegations. Words scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Billionaire heiress accused of kidnapping. Warehouse massacre linked to Vesper Empire. International investigation pending. This is impossible, Zayden said. I'm not being held against my will. I married her this morning. How can she? Because she's smart, Ria said quietly. Smarter than I gave her credit for. Minseo pulled up another screen. The marriage certificate hasn't been processed into public records yet. Legally, as far as the system knows, you're still married to Caroline, which means she can file these charges as your legal spouse claiming you've been manipulated. So we show them the certificate, prove we got married. That invalidates everything. No. Ria's voice was flat. We show them the certificate and it confirms we rushed into marriage the day after a violent attack. It looks exactly like what she's claiming, that I coerced you into legal protection to avoid prosecution. Zayden's mind raced. Then I'll make a statement. Tell them the truth. Your truth or Caroline's truth? You think the media will believe the black American who married Seoul's most notorious criminal over the sympathetic wife claiming her husband was brainwashed? Ria turned away from the screens. She's already won the narrative. Anything we say now just sounds like we're covering our tracks. So what do? We wait. Let my lawyers handle it. Keep you hidden until this blows over. Hidden? For how long? However long it takes. Zayden stared at her. You want to lock me in this compound while you fight my battles for me? I want to keep you alive and out of custody while I dismantle whatever evidence Caroline's manufactured. Ria's eyes were cold again. Dead again. The warmth from last night buried under layers of strategic calculation. This is what I do, Zayden. I protect my assets. Assets. The word tasted like poison. Is that what I am now? You're my husband, which makes you the most valuable asset I have and the biggest liability I've ever acquired. She gestured to Minseo. Show him to the East Wing. Full lockdown protocols. Nobody in or out without my authorization. Ria, you can't just, I can, I will. She met his eyes, and there was nothing soft in her gaze. You wanted to be part of my world, Zayden. Welcome to it. This is what partnership looks like when you're married to me. She walked out, leaving him standing in the command center with Minseo's disapproving stare burning into his back. I warned you, Minseo said quietly. Told you she doesn't do attachment, she does possession, and now you belong to her. I don't belong to anyone, don't you? Minseo gestured to the screens showing news coverage of the scandal. Your face is all over Korean media. Your ex-wife is painting you as a victim. The woman you just married is treating you like property to be secured. Tell me, Mr. Vale, do you feel free? Zayden had no answer. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of forced isolation and mounting tension. Zayden was confined to the East Wing while Ria orchestrated damage control from her office. He saw her in passing, moving between rooms with lawyers in tow, phone pressed to her ear, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. She didn't come to bed, didn't eat meals with him, barely spoke to him beyond terse updates delivered through Minseo. The scandal metastasized. More allegations surfaced, claims that Ria had orchestrated Caroline's company's collapse out of jealousy, that the warehouse fire was a targeted hit against rivals, that Zayden's entire relationship with Ria was built on Stockholm Syndrome and financial coercion. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when the narrative was this compelling. On the 4th day, Zayden found Ria alone in her father's old study, surrounded by documents, whiskey bottle nearly empty on the desk beside her. You should be in your wing, she said without looking up. I'm tired of being locked away like I'm the problem here. You're not the problem. You're the solution everyone's fighting over. She finally met his eyes, and the exhaustion there was staggering. Caroline doesn't want you back, Zayden. She wants to destroy me, and you're the most efficient weapon she could have chosen. Then let me fight. Let me make a statement, hold a press conference. And say what? That you fell in love with me in 3 weeks? That you married me the day after I killed people to save you? That sounds like a trauma bond, not a relationship. It sounds exactly like what she's claiming. Because you won't let me explain the context, won't let me tell our story. Our story makes me look weak. Ria stood abruptly, the chair scraping across hardwood. Every detail you share, the club, the protection, the way I destroyed people who threatened you, all of it confirms that I've compromised myself for you. My enemies are already circling. If they believe I've actually developed feelings, actually care about something other than power, they'll tear me apart. So you'd rather lie? Pretend I'm just another business transaction? I'd rather survive this with my empire intact. She moved to the window, arms crossed, shoulders rigid. You don't understand what's at stake. I have agreements with organizations across Asia, contracts that depend on my reputation as someone untouchable. The moment they believe I've become human, they'll assume I've become weak, and weak people get devoured. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you proposed to me in a burning parking lot. Ria flinched like he'd struck her. That was a mistake. The words hung between them like shrapnel. A mistake, Zayden repeated slowly. I was emotional, terrified. I'd just watched you nearly die, and I said things I shouldn't have said, made promises I can't keep. You said you loved me. I lied. She said it without inflection, without looking at him. I needed you compliant, needed you bonded to me so you wouldn't run. Love was the most efficient tool. Zayden felt something crack inside his chest. You're lying now. Am I? Ria turned to face him, and her expression was the same blank mask she'd worn the night they met. How would you know the difference? You've known me for a month, Zayden. You think that's enough time to understand who I really am? I know you're scared. I know you're pushing me away because that's what you do when people get close. See? I'm pushing you away because you're a liability I can no longer afford. She crossed to her desk, pulled out a folder, and threw it toward him. Papers scattered across the floor. Divorce papers. Already prepared. Sign them, and I'll handle Caroline's allegations. Get the charges dropped. Secure your safety and your future. Zayden stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. You're divorcing me. I'm releasing you. There's a difference. Is there? He kicked the papers aside. Or are you just doing what you always do, destroying something before it can hurt you? Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally being honest about what this was. Ria's voice stayed flat, controlled, but her hand shook as she poured more whiskey. You were a broken toy I wanted to fix, a project, something to occupy my time while I rebuilt my empire after the Mori conflict, and now the project's become too expensive. I don't believe you. Then you're an idiot. She drained the glass. Sign the papers, Zayden. Go back to your life. Find someone who can actually love you, instead of someone who just knows how to pretend. Every word landed like a physical blow. Zayden wanted to fight back, wanted to call her bluff, wanted to break through that mask and find the woman who'd cried while saving him. But the exhaustion in her eyes wasn't fake. The fear beneath her coldness wasn't manufactured. She believed every word she was saying, or had convinced herself she did. If I sign these, Zayden said quietly, if I walk away, you're alone again. No leverage against Caroline, no protection from Mori, no one who sees you as anything other than a weapon. I'll survive. I always do. Surviving isn't living. No, but it's predictable, safe, and I'm tired of things I can't control. She met his eyes. Please, Zayden, just sign the papers and leave. Make this easy for both of us. He should have fought harder, should have refused, should have called her coward and broken down her walls through sheer, stubborn persistence. Instead, he picked up the papers, looked at them, looked at her, and saw someone so terrified of being hurt that she'd rather burn everything down than risk feeling real. You win, he said. Relief and devastation warred across Ria's face before she locked it down. Minseo will arrange transport back to Seoul. You'll stay in a hotel under protection until Caroline's charges are resolved. Then you're free. That's it? That's all you have to say? What else is there? Everything, Zayden wanted to scream. There's everything we built in the wreckage. Everything you felt when you thought I was dying. Everything you promised when you asked me to marry you. But he just nodded, set the unsigned papers on her desk, turned toward the door. Zayden. He stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Ria said quietly. For what it's worth, you were the first person who made me want to try, to be something other than what my father built, and I'll regret ruining that for the rest of my life. Then don't ruin it. It's already done. He left without looking back. Mincio drove him to Seoul in silence, the city lights blurring through rain-streaked windows. She deposited him at a luxury hotel in Gangnam with enough security to guard a head of state and instructions not to leave the suite. Zayden sat in the empty hotel room, staring at divorce papers he still hadn't signed, wondering when everything had fallen apart. His phone, a new one Mincio had provided, buzzed with a message. I heard Vesper kicked you out. How unfortunate. If you'd like to discuss reconciliation, I'm willing to meet. For old times' sake. Carolyn Zayden stared at the message, anger rising like bile. This was all her fault. The allegations, the media circus, the pressure that had finally cracked Ria's defenses and convinced her that love was more dangerous than loneliness. His phone buzzed again. Another message from an unknown number. She'll be alone now, vulnerable. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Vale. Maury. Ice flooded Zayden's veins. Maury knew he'd left the estate, which meant he had eyes on Ria's operation, which meant he was already planning his next move. And Ria had just dismissed her only weakness, sent Zayden away to protect her empire, not realizing that her isolation made her the perfect target. Zayden looked at the divorce papers, looked at the messages, looked at the security detail outside his door who answered to Ria but wouldn't let him leave. Then he made a decision. He grabbed his jacket, walked to the window, and started calculating the drop to the fire escape. Because Ria might have given up on them. But he hadn't given up on her. Even if saving her meant disobeying every order she'd given. Even if it meant walking back into the fire that had nearly killed them both. The drop to the fire escape was 12 feet. Zayden landed badly, ankle twisting, pain shooting up his leg. He bit back a curse and limped down the metal stairs, emerging into a rain-slicked alley behind the hotel. No security, no tail, just souls and different city noise washing over him. He pulled up a car service app, requested a ride to the outskirts of Gangnam, and disappeared into the back seat before Ria's people could realize he was gone. The driver tried making conversation. Zayden ignored him, mind racing through everything he knew about Ria's estate. Security protocols, blind spots, the escape route she'd shown him that first day. If Maury was planning an attack, he'd hit during the narrow window when Ria thought she was safe. When she believed sending Zayden away had removed her vulnerability instead of broadcasting her isolation. Tonight. It would happen tonight. The ride took 40 minutes through traffic that felt deliberately slow. By the time they reached the base of the mountain road leading to the estate, full dark had fallen. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the mountain into a wall of black water. Zayden paid the driver in cash and started climbing. The estate's outer perimeter was 3 miles up a road designed to funnel visitors through checkpoints. But Ria had mentioned the old service path, overgrown, unmarked, used by her father's staff before he'd upgraded security. Zayden found it after 20 minutes of searching, his ankles screaming with every step. The path was barely visible through undergrowth, but he pushed forward, using his phone's flashlight to navigate. Halfway up the mountain, he heard it. Gunfire. Not the controlled bursts of a security drill. Chaotic. Desperate. The sound of a firefight. Zayden broke into a run despite his ankle, branches tearing at his face, rain making the path treacherous. The gunfire intensified. Explosions bloomed in the distance, too close to the main house. He emerged from the tree line behind the estate's eastern wall just as a section of it detonated. Men in black tactical gear poured through the breach. Maury soldiers, heavily armed, moving with military precision. Ria's security tried to hold them off, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, fighting a defensive battle they were clearly losing. Zayden's mind went blank with panic. Ria was in there. He scrambled over debris, through the smoking hole in the wall, into the estate's outer gardens. Bodies littered the ground, some wearing Ria's security uniforms, others in Maury's colors. Blood mixed with rain, turning ornamental koi ponds dark. The main house burned, not fully, just the west wing, flames eating through traditional wood like it was paper. Zayden sprinted toward the entrance, shouting Ria's name, too terrified to care about stealth. A figure emerged from smoke. Min Seo, bleeding from a head wound, clutching a handgun. Vale? She stared at him like he was a ghost. You shouldn't be here. Where's Ria? Panic room, sealed herself inside when they breached the perimeter. Min Seo grabbed his arm. You need to run. Mori's inside. He brought 40 men. We're down to... An explosion rocked the estate. The ground beneath them shifted. The panic room, Zayden said. How do I reach it? You can't. It's designed to withstand. How do I reach it? Min Seo's eyes were wild with pain and fear. There's a service entrance, through the library, but Mori's men are... Zayden didn't wait for her to finish. He ran. The main house was chaos. Smoke, flames, bodies. He stumbled over a dead guard he recognized from breakfast 3 days ago, fought down bile, kept moving. The library was exactly where Ria had shown him, through the main corridor, past her father's old study. The door stood open. Inside, bookshelves had been torn apart, first editions scattered like trash. And in the center of the room, standing before the concealed panic room door, was Mori Takeshi. He looked older than Zayden remembered from the warehouse. Tired, blood-stained his expensive suit, but his eyes were bright with victory. Ah, Mr. Vale, Mori smiled. I wondered if you'd come back. Love makes people so predictably stupid. Zayden's hands clenched into fists. Get away from that door. Or what? You'll fight me? Mori gestured to the chaos outside. I have 40 soldiers. You have misplaced heroism and a limp. This isn't a fairy tale, boy. You don't win. Then why are you still here? Why aren't you already inside? Mori's smile tightened. The door is remarkably well designed, but I have time. My men are eliminating the last of her security. Soon it will just be me, this door, and however long it takes to break through. She'll kill you the moment you open it. Perhaps, or perhaps she'll negotiate. Mori pulled out a tablet, showing security footage from inside the panic room. Ria sat on the floor, back against a wall, gun in hand, face streaked with ash and tears. She looked small, breakable. Nothing like the untouchable queen who ruled Seoul's underworld. She's been watching her empire burn through these cameras, Mori said. Watching her people die. Knowing she's trapped, while everything she built collapses around her. How long do you think before survival instinct overrides pride? Before she opens this door herself and begs for terms? Zayden's throat closed. Let her go. Take me instead. I already had you, remember? You weren't valuable enough to keep. Mori tilted his head. But perhaps you have another use. Perhaps if she hears your voice outside this door, hears you begging her to surrender, she'll finally break. He gestured to 2 soldiers who emerged from the shadows, grabbing Zayden's arms. No! They dragged him to the panic room door. Mori pressed a button on the tablet. Vesper, I have a guest for you. Inside the room, Ria's head snapped up. Her eyes found the camera, widened in horror. Zayden? Her voice came through tinny speakers. No, he's not here. He left. He's safe. He came back, Mori said. Climbed a mountain in the rain, ran through a war zone, all to save you. He grabbed Zayden's face, forcing it toward the camera. Look at what your weakness has wrought, Vesper. He'll die because you made him believe you cared. Don't. Ria stood, pressing against the door like she could reach through it. Mori, please, let him go. I'll give you anything, everything. Just let him walk away. Open the door. I can't. Open the door or I start removing pieces of him until you do. One of the soldiers produced a knife. Ria's face crumpled. Don't hurt him, please. He's nobody. He's nothing. He doesn't matter. Then opening the door costs you nothing. Silence. Zayden could see her mind racing, calculating odds, weighing options. This was the moment. Either she'd sacrifice herself to save him, or she'd let him die to preserve what was left of her empire. Their eyes met through the camera, and Zayden knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd already made her choice. The panic room door's locks began to disengage, one by one. Click, click, click. No, Zayden said. Ria, don't do this. The door swung open. Rhea stood in the entrance, gun raised but pointed at the floor, surrender clear in every line of her body. "Let him go," she said. "Take me. Kill me. Do whatever you need to do. But let Zayden walk out of here alive." Maury smiled. "How touching." Then he nodded to his soldiers. They threw Zayden aside and surged toward Rhea. She fired once, twice, dropping the first two men. But there were too many. They swarmed her, dragging her from the panic room, slamming her against the wall. Zayden tried to stand, to fight, but a boot crashed into his ribs. He went down gasping. Through blurred vision, he watched Maury approach Rhea, watched him grab her face with brutal, casual violence. "You should have stayed hidden," Maury said. "Should have let him die. At least then you'd have survived." "Fuck you," Rhea spat blood. "You think killing me ends this? My people will hunt you across every country. Your people are dead. Your empire is ash. And the woman who claimed she felt nothing is about to die begging for a man she knew for a month." Maury pulled out a gun. "Any last words?" Rhea's eyes found Zayden's across the burning room. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For lying. For pushing you away. For not being brave enough to choose you over survival." "Rhea." Maury pressed the gun against her temple. And everything that happened next occurred in the span of a heartbeat. The library windows exploded inward. Black-clad figures repelled through smoke and glass. Not Maury's men. Different uniforms, military-grade equipment. Gunfire erupted. Maury's soldiers dropped. The men holding Rhea fell back, bleeding. Maury swung his gun toward the new arrivals and took 3 bullets to the chest before he could fire. He collapsed onto expensive carpet, eyes wide with shock, blood pooling beneath him. Rhea scrambled toward Zayden as armed soldiers secured the room with mechanical efficiency. Someone was shouting orders in Korean. Someone else was calling for medics. And then a woman stepped through the smoke and shattered glass, and Zayden's entire understanding of reality tilted. She was Korean, mid-50s, expensive suit beneath tactical armor, face that looked familiar in a way Zayden couldn't place, until she looked at Rhea with an expression of profound disappointment. "Hello, daughter," she said. Rhea's face went white as death. "No, you're dead. You've been dead for 15 years. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." The woman gestured to her soldiers. "Secure the perimeter. Make sure Maury's people are eliminated. I want this estate locked down within 10 minutes. They moved like machines, flowing out of the room to execute orders without question. The woman turned back to Rhea. "We need to talk. About your inheritance. About what your father actually built. And about the organization you've been running without knowing who really controls it." Rhea stood slowly, and Zayden saw something he'd never seen before in her eyes. Pure, absolute terror. "Who are you?" Zayden managed to ask. The woman smiled. "I'm Jihye Vesper, Rhea's mother, CEO of Vesper Industries." Her smile sharpened. "And the person who's been pulling your wife's strings since the day her father died." Outside, Seoul burned in the distance. Inside, the library smoldered with bodies and broken power. And Zayden realized with sickening clarity that everything, the empire, the war with Maury, even Rhea's supposed control over her own life, had been an elaborate illusion. They'd never been fighting for survival. They'd been performing exactly as someone else scripted. And now the real architect of their destruction had finally stepped onto the stage. The library felt like a tomb. Smoke curled through broken windows. Bodies cooling on expensive carpet. And in the center of the wreckage stood a woman who was supposed to be dead, looking at her daughter like she was examining a disappointing investment. Jihye Vesper moved with the same predatory grace Rhea had, the same calculated precision in every gesture. But where Rhea's coldness was a mask built from trauma, her mother's felt foundational, like ice frozen so deep it had become bedrock. "You're not real," Rhea whispered. "You died when I was 15. Car accident. I saw the body." "You saw what your father wanted you to see." Jihye gestured to one of her soldiers, who produced a tablet. She pulled up photographs, official documents, death certificates, closed casket funeral records. "He staged my death perfectly, convinced Seoul's elite that his wife had perished tragically, collected insurance, consolidated power, and sent me to Singapore to build the networks he couldn't touch openly." Zayden watched Rhea's face crumble and rebuild in the span of seconds, emotion flickering across her features before she locked it down. Why? Ria's voice cracked. Why let me believe you were dead for 15 years? Because your father understood that grief makes excellent motivation. Jihye circled her daughter slowly. He needed you angry, focused, willing to become the weapon he'd spent your childhood forging. A dead mother gave you that edge, made you hungry for power, for control, for the strength to never be vulnerable again. He let me think I was alone. You were never alone. You were always watched, always guided. Jihye stopped directly in front of Ria. Every major decision you made after he died, every alliance, every war, every strategic move, I orchestrated from the shadows. The Mori conflict, I baited them into attacking. Your expansion into Japan, I cleared the path. Even your relationship with Mr. Vale here. She glanced at Zayden with cold amusement. I allowed it because I wanted to see if you'd finally learn to separate sentiment from strategy. Ria's breathing went shallow. You've been controlling me. I've been protecting our empire. Your father built the foundation, but I built the infrastructure, the real power networks, the connections that make Vesper Industries untouchable. Jihye moved to the window, surveying the burning estate with clinical detachment. You thought you were running Seoul's underworld? You were managing a franchise. I own the corporation. Zayden forced himself upright despite the pain radiating from his ribs. You let Mori attack her. Let people die. Let your own daughter nearly get killed. To teach her a lesson she refused to learn on her own. Jihye's eyes were empty of warmth. Ria has always been too emotional, too reactive. She lets personal feelings compromise strategic thinking. Her father tried to beat it out of her. I tried a subtler approach, controlled environments where failure had consequences but not fatal ones. This was a test? Ria's voice rose, fury breaking through shock. You orchestrated a siege that killed 30 of my people to test me? To show you the cost of weakness. To demonstrate what happens when you let someone become more important than survival. Jihye gestured to Zayden. You fell in love with a random man you met in a nightclub, married him within a month, destroyed entire organizations to protect him. And in doing so, you broadcast to every enemy we have that you'd sacrifice strategic advantage for personal attachment. That makes you a liability. So you sent Mori to punish me. I sent Mori to remind you who you are, what you're meant to be. Jihye's smile was razor thin. The fact that you opened that panic room door to save him proves my point. You chose emotion over empire, love over legacy, and that choice would have gotten you killed if I hadn't intervened. Ria stared at her mother like she was seeing a monster wearing a familiar face. You're insane. I'm practical. There's a difference. Jihye pulled out her phone, showing security footage from earlier in the evening. Zayden climbing the mountain, Ria sealing herself in the panic room, the firefight that had decimated her security. I knew he'd come back, knew you'd sacrifice everything to save him. I was counting on it, because now you understand the fundamental truth your father tried to teach you. People you love become weapons your enemies use against you. Then why save us at all? Zayden demanded. If you wanted to teach Ria that lesson, why not let Mori finish it? Jihye looked at him properly for the first time, and Zayden felt himself being assessed and categorized in seconds. Because dead, my daughter is useless. Broken and rebuilt correctly, she becomes what she was always meant to be. The perfect heir to an empire that spans 3 continents and touches every corrupt system in Asia. She turned back to Ria. You have a choice now. Recognize that your attachment to Mr. Vale is a weakness that nearly destroyed everything we've built, cut him loose, and resume your position with proper oversight from me. Or cling to this fantasy of love and watch me dismantle every piece of power you think you control. The air in the library crystallized into something deadly. Ria stood very still, blood drying on her face, ash in her hair, everything she'd built burning around her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut. You're not my mother. Jihye's expression flickered. Excuse me? My mother died 15 years ago. Maybe not in a car crash. Maybe not the way father said. But the woman who read me stories and taught me to play piano and promised she'd never let anyone hurt me, she's dead. Ria took a step forward. You're something he created. Something worse than he ever was. At least father was honest about being a monster. Ria, No. Another step. You orchestrated a massacre to teach me a lesson about love. You let me believe I was alone for 15 years to make me cruel. You pulled strings and manipulated my entire life because you think people are just assets to be optimized. Ria's hands clenched into fists. You're exactly what I was terrified of becoming, and I'd rather die than let you turn me into you. Jihye's face went cold. You don't have that option. You're my daughter, my investment, my creation. I'm my own person. Ria's voice rose. And I choose him. I choose love. I choose the weakness you think will destroy me, because at least it makes me human. The soldiers in the room shifted, hands moving toward weapons, awaiting orders from Jihye. Zayden moved closer to Ria, ignoring the pain, positioning himself between her and the armed men. We're leaving. Jihye laughed. With what leverage? I own this estate. Control your accounts. Have 50 soldiers on this property who answer only to me. You have nothing except each other, which is precisely my point. Then we leave with nothing. Zayden grabbed Ria's hand. Better to have nothing together than everything alone. For one crystalline moment, Zayden saw something flicker across Jihye's face. Not quite emotion, not quite regret, but close enough to suggest that maybe, buried deep beneath decades of calculated cruelty, there was still something human left. Then it vanished. If you walk out that door, Jihye said quietly, I will destroy you both, systematically, completely. Every asset Ria has will disappear. Every ally will turn. Every safe place will become a trap. You'll have nothing except each other, and eventually that won't be enough. He'll resent you for the life you cost him. You'll resent him for the empire you sacrificed. And you'll both die poor, bitter, and regretting the moment you chose emotion over strategy. Maybe, Ria said. Or maybe we'll prove you wrong. She pulled Zayden toward the library's shattered windows, toward the mountain darkness beyond. Stop them, Jihye ordered. The soldiers raised their weapons, but before anyone could fire, an explosion rocked the eastern section of the estate. Not fire this time. Something bigger. The ground trembled, alarms shrieked, Jihye's phone erupted with calls. She answered, listened for 3 seconds, and her face went white. What is it? One of her soldiers asked. Mori's people. They weren't all eliminated. They've taken the armory. Her eyes met Ria's. This isn't over. Ria's laugh was bitter. You wanted to teach me about consequences? Congratulations. You just discovered them. She and Zayden ran. Through the library, down corridors choked with smoke, past bodies of people who died defending a woman who wasn't even there. The estate was a war zone, fires burning out of control, gunfire echoing from multiple directions, Jihye's soldiers engaging with Mori's remaining forces. They emerged into the garden courtyard just as another explosion tore through the western wall. Ria grabbed Zayden's arm, pulling him toward the garage complex. The cars, are probably rigged. We go on foot. She changed direction, sprinting toward the service gate that led to the mountain path. Behind them, Jihye's voice echoed through the chaos, shouting orders, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond her careful orchestration. Zayden and Ria hit the mountain path at full speed, rain hammering down, darkness absolute except for the orange glow of the burning estate behind them. Zayden's ankles screamed with every step. Ria's breathing came in ragged gasps, but they didn't slow. They were a half-mile down the mountain when headlights appeared ahead of them. A vehicle, coming up the path. Too fast to be a civilian, Ria pulled Zayden off the trail into the undergrowth just seconds before the SUV roared past, heading toward the estate. Through the rain-streaked windows, Zayden caught a glimpse of armed men, more of Mori's people, or Jihye's. Impossible to tell anymore. We need to get off this mountain, Ria gasped. Get to Seoul. Disappear before either of them finds us. And then what? Your mother controls everything? Not everything. Ria wiped rain and blood from her face. She controls Vesper Industries, controls the empire father built. But I have accounts she doesn't know about. Resources I hid precisely because I didn't trust anyone. Emergency protocols for situations exactly like this. You planned for your dead mother coming back to life and trying to control you? I planned for everyone eventually betraying me. Turns out, I was right. She pulled out a phone Zayden hadn't realized she'd grabbed. A burner, probably. Something from the panic room. I'm calling someone who owes me a favor. Someone Ji Hye can't touch. She dialed, waited, then spoke in rapid Korean, her voice low and urgent. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. When she hung up, her expression was grim. There's a safe house in Busan, 3 hours by car. He'll have transport waiting at the base of the mountain in 20 minutes. Who's he? Someone from my father's time. Someone Ji Hye tried to eliminate when she took over but failed. Someone who'd be very interested to know she's alive and pulling strings. Rhea started moving again, faster now. We get to Busan, we regroup, and then we figure out how to take back my life from a woman who spent 15 years stealing it. They reached the base of the mountain 17 minutes later, soaked and exhausted. A black sedan waited exactly where Rhea said it would. Engine running, driver wearing an expression that suggested he'd seen worse nights, but not many. He nodded once to Rhea and opened the back door without speaking. They climbed in. The car pulled away from the burning mountain, heading toward the highway that would take them to Busan. In the back seat, Rhea finally allowed herself to collapse against Zayden, her whole body shaking. "I opened the door," she whispered, "when Maury had you. I was willing to die rather than let him hurt you. Everything I said about you being a mistake, about not loving you, I lied. I lied because I was terrified, and lying felt safer than admitting the truth. I know. I chose you over the empire, over survival, over everything my father and mother spent my life teaching me to value." She looked up at him with eyes that held no mask anymore, just raw exhaustion and honesty. "I chose you, and it almost got us both killed. But I'd do it again, right now, without hesitation. Does that make me weak or just stupid?" Zayden pulled her closer, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "It makes you human. Finally. Human doesn't survive in my world." "Then maybe we need to find a different world." The car accelerated onto the highway, Seoul's lights fading behind them. Ahead, Busan waited. A city neither Ji Hye nor Mori controlled completely, a place where Rhea might have enough leverage to fight back. But the war was far from over. Rhea's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You can run, daughter, but you can't hide from family. I built you, I own you, and I will bring you home. Mother." Rhea deleted the message without responding. Then a second message appeared, this one from a different unknown number, Vesper. "Mori is dead, but his organization lives. They know you're vulnerable. They're coming for you. And when they find you, I won't save you again. Come home or face them alone. Your choice." J.H. Zayden read both messages over Rhea's shoulder. "She's giving you an ultimatum. She's making a mistake." Rhea's voice hardened. "She thinks I need her protection, need her empire. But I survived my father's brutality, Seoul's underworld, and her manipulation for 15 years. I'll survive this too." "How?" "By doing what she taught me. By being ruthless, strategic, willing to sacrifice everything to win." Rhea looked at him. "Starting with the thing she thinks is my weakness." Zayden's chest tightened, meaning me, meaning making her believe you are. Rhea sat up, her mind visibly shifting into tactical mode. "She orchestrated this entire crisis to prove that loving you makes me vulnerable. So we prove her wrong. We use her assumption against her. Make her think I've learned my lesson, cut you loose, come crawling back. While I do what? Disappear? Watch from a distance while you walk back into her trap? While you become the weapon she doesn't see coming." Rhea's eyes blazed. "Ji Hye controls my empire through fear and infrastructure. But she doesn't control the people who actually execute her orders. Soldiers who think they're serving Vesper Industries, not knowing there's a puppet master pulling strings. If we can expose her, prove to Seoul's underworld that the great Ji Hye Vesper has been manipulating everyone from the shadows, we destroy her credibility, her power. And how do we prove that? With evidence, documentation, recordings of her admitting what she did." Rhea pulled up files on her phone, security footage she'd been recording since childhood, a habit born from surviving her father's paranoia. "I have cameras throughout the estate, including in that library. Everything she said tonight, everything she admitted, it's recorded, encrypted, backed up to servers she doesn't control." Zayden stared at her. "You recorded your own mother confessing to orchestrating your destruction." "I record everything. It's how I've survived this long." Rhea's smile was sharp. The question is how we use it without getting killed before the information spreads. The driver spoke for the first time, his voice rough. You leak it through the networks, not all at once. Carefully. To people who have reasons to hate being manipulated, let them do the work of destroying her credibility. Ria met the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror. You worked for my father. I worked for your mother too, until she decided I knew too much and tried to have me killed. Clearly, she failed. He navigated onto a smaller road heading away from the main highway. I've spent 15 years building my own network. People who remember the old ways, who resent Jihye's corporate restructuring, they'd be very interested in this footage. Why help me? Because your father was a monster, but he was an honest monster. Your mother is worse. She's a liar who thinks she's virtuous, and I'd very much like to see her empire collapse. He glanced at Zayden. Plus, I appreciate a good love story, rare thing in our world. They drove in silence for another hour. Busan's outskirts appeared through the rain, industrial buildings giving way to the port city's dense urban sprawl. The driver took them to a warehouse district near the docks, pulling into a loading bay that had clearly been converted into a makeshift safe house. Armed guards, the driver's people presumably, secured the perimeter. Inside, the warehouse was surprisingly comfortable. Cots, supplies, communication equipment, a staging area for people who'd needed to disappear quickly before. You'll be safe here for a few days, the driver said, long enough to coordinate your counterattack. I'll spread the footage through my networks. You focus on staying alive. Ria nodded. Thank you, Daijung. The driver, Daijung, bowed slightly. Your father saved my life once. Consider this debt repayment. He left, closing the warehouse door behind him. Alone finally, Zayden and Ria stood in the empty warehouse, the enormity of the night crashing down on them. We're actually doing this, Zayden said, going to war with your mother. We're already at war, this is just acknowledging it. Ria moved to the communication equipment, pulling up encrypted files. She'll come for us. The moment she realizes what we're planning, she'll mobilize everything she has. Mori's remaining people, her private soldiers, every asset she controls, will be hunted across Korea. So we need allies, people who benefit from Jihye's fall, and people who hate being manipulated more than they fear her. Ria started making a list, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Seoul's crime families, the ones she's controlled through blackmail and strategic pressure. If we give them proof that she's been orchestrating their conflicts, using them as pawns, they'll turn on her. If we're lucky, if we're not, they'll kill us for disrupting the power structure. Ria looked at him. This is your last chance to walk away, Zayden. Everything after this point gets exponentially more dangerous. I'm going to start a war that will burn through Seoul's underworld. People will die, including possibly us. So if you want out... He kissed her. Hard, final. The kind of kiss that answered every question. I'm in, he said. Until the end, whatever that looks like. Ria's eyes glistened. You're insane. So you keep telling me. They worked through the night, assembling evidence, crafting messages, identifying targets within Jihye's network who might be persuaded to turn. Daijung's people filtered in and out, delivering updates from Seoul. The estate had burned to the ground. Jihye had retreated to her Singapore headquarters, publicly claiming the attack was retaliation from Mori's organization. She'd made no mention of Ria or Zayden, which meant she was still hoping to bring them back quietly. That gave them time. Not much, but enough. At dawn, Ria sent the first message. A video file to the heads of Seoul's 3 largest crime families. Footage of Jihye admitting she'd been controlling their organizations from the shadows, orchestrating their conflicts, playing them against each other for profit. Then she waited. The responses came within hours. First, confusion. Then anger. Then the kind of cold fury that preceded bloodshed. By nightfall, the message had spread through Seoul's underworld like wildfire. Jihye's name, once spoken with fearful respect, became a curse. Organizations she'd controlled for years began severing ties, cutting off her revenue streams, questioning every order that came from Singapore. Her empire started fracturing, and Jihye, realizing what was happening, made her move. The attack came at midnight on their 3rd day in Busan. Zayden woke to the sound of gunfire. Ria was already moving, grabbing weapons Daijung had provided, shouting orders to the guards outside. They found us, she said. We need to move. Now! They ran through the warehouse as explosions tore through the loading bay. Jihye's soldiers, more than Daijung's people could handle, poured in from multiple directions. Daijung appeared, bleeding from a shoulder wound. There's a boat at the dock, fueled and ready. Go! What about you? Rhea demanded. I'll slow them down, buy you time. He shoved a set of keys into her hand. Dock 17, don't waste the chance. More gunfire. Daejung returned fire, covering their escape. Rhea and Zayden sprinted through the warehouse district, Seoul's skyline visible across the water, night alive with violence. Behind them, the warehouse exploded into flames. They reached Dock 17. A speedboat waited, exactly as promised. Rhea fired the engine. Zayden cast off the lines. They were 50 feet from the dock when Jihye's soldiers reached the waterfront. Bullets tore through the air. Zayden felt one zip past his head, close enough to feel the heat. Rhea pushed the throttle to maximum. The boat roared across dark water, Busan's industrial harbor becoming a maze of shipping containers and cargo vessels. They'd just cleared the main shipping lanes when another boat appeared behind them. Faster. Gaining. They're not giving up, Zayden shouted over the engine noise. Neither are we. Rhea's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. Hold on. She cut hard to port, threading between two cargo ships with inches to spare. The pursuing boat tried to follow, clipped the hull of one ship, and spun out. But two more boats appeared from different directions. Coordinated. Professional. Rhea? I know. She scanned the harbor, calculating angles. There. A narrow channel between dock warehouses. Barely wide enough for the speedboat. Definitely not wide enough for the larger pursuit vessels. She aimed for it. Are you insane? Zayden yelled. Probably. They shot into the channel doing 50 knots. Walls blurred past on both sides. The pursuit boats tried to follow, realized too late they wouldn't fit, and had to pull off. Rhea burst out the other side into open water, heading away from Busan toward the coastline. They just started to believe they'd escaped when the helicopter appeared. It dropped from the night sky like divine retribution, searchlight pinning them against the dark water. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker speaking Korean. What's it saying? Zayden asked. Rhea's face was grim. Stop the boat or they'll open fire. The helicopter descended lower, rotor wash creating waves that rocked the speedboat. Your mother's in that helicopter, isn't she? Zayden said. Probably. Rhea's hand hovered over the throttle. We could run, try to outmaneuver them, but they have guns and we have a speedboat. That math doesn't end well. So we stop? We stop. We face her, and we end this. Rhea cut the engine. The speedboat drifted to a halt in dark water. The helicopter landed on a nearby cargo ship's deck, and soldiers rappelled down, securing the boat, disarming them with efficient brutality. Then Jihye descended. She looked like she'd walked out of a corporate meeting. Perfect suit, perfect hair, not a trace of the chaos she'd orchestrated visible on her face. That was reckless, she said, stepping onto the speedboat like she owned it, which, Zayden reflected bitterly, she probably did. You could have been killed. You were shooting at us, Rhea snarled. Warning shots. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Jihye gestured to her soldiers. Secure them. We're going back to Seoul. This charade ends now. The footage is already out, Rhea said. Every crime family in Seoul knows what you did. Your network is collapsing. You've already lost. Networks can be rebuilt. Relationships can be repaired. Power is resilient when properly maintained. Jihye's smile was cold. But you made one critical error, daughter. You assumed exposing me would turn people against me. Instead, it just showed them how effective I've been, how much control I've had without them knowing. Some are angry, yes, but most are impressed, and impressed people can be recruited. Zayden felt his stomach drop. You're using the exposure as a demonstration. I'm using it as advertising, showing the entire criminal underworld that I'm the one who's been running things successfully for 15 years. That Rhea was just my puppet, and now that everyone knows it, they're coming to me directly. She pulled out her phone, showing messages from organizations requesting meetings, proposing alliances, seeking her expertise. You didn't destroy me, Rhea. You made me more valuable. Rhea lunged at her mother with a scream of pure rage. Jihe's soldiers grabbed her, slammed her against the boat's deck. Enough, Jihe said. You've played your rebellion. It was entertaining, but it's over now. You come back to Singapore. You resume your position under my guidance. And Mr. Vale here, she looked at Zayden with clinical assessment. Mr. Vale disappears, quietly, permanently. One less liability for you to worry about. No, Rhea gasped, struggling against the soldiers holding her. Please, I'll do anything. I'll come back. I'll obey. Just don't hurt him. You're not negotiating. You're accepting terms. Jihe nodded to one of her soldiers, who produced a gun and pressed it against Zayden's temple. The metal was cold. Final. Zayden met Rhea's eyes across the boat, seeing absolute devastation in them. I love you, Rhea whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger, and then the night exploded with gunfire from a completely different direction. The soldier holding the gun to Zayden's head jerked and fell. Jihe's other soldiers scattered, returning fire at an unseen enemy. Through the chaos, Zayden saw boats approaching from 3 directions. Not Jihe's people. Different flags. Different colors. Seoul's crime families, the ones Rhea had sent the footage to. And they weren't here to negotiate. They were here for blood. The night exploded into chaos. Gunfire tore through the darkness from 3 directions as Seoul's crime families converged on the speedboat like wolves descending on wounded prey. Jihe's soldiers returned fire, but they were outgunned, outnumbered, caught in a crossfire they hadn't anticipated. Zayden hit the deck as bullets shredded the air where his head had been. Rhea twisted free from the soldier holding her, driving her elbow into his throat, grabbing his weapon as he fell choking. Get down! She screamed at Zayden, firing at Jihe's soldiers with cold precision. The approaching boats weren't trying to rescue them. They were trying to kill Jihe, and anyone standing near her became collateral damage. Jihe dove behind the speedboat's console, shouting orders that were drowned out by gunfire and the roar of engines. Her helicopter tried to lift off from the nearby cargo ship, but one of the approaching boats had a mounted weapon that tore through its rotors. The helicopter spun, crashed back onto the deck in a ball of flame and twisted metal. Rhea grabbed Zayden's arm. We jump, now, while they're focused on her. Into the ocean? In the dark? Better than staying here and getting shot. She didn't wait for agreement, just pulled him toward the edge of the speedboat. They jumped together. The water hit like frozen concrete, driving the air from Zayden's lungs. He surfaced gasping, disoriented, waves chopping around him. Rhea emerged beside him, gripping his jacket to keep them together. Above them, the firefight intensified. The speedboat was being torn apart by crossfire. Jihe's soldiers were dying, their bodies falling into dark water with dull splashes that disappeared beneath engine noise and screaming. Swim, Rhea gasped. Away from the boats, toward the shore. They swam through cold black water while violence raged behind them. Zayden's clothes dragged him down. His lungs burned. His injured ankle sent spikes of pain through his leg with every kick, but Rhea kept pulling him forward, refusing to let him sink. They'd made it maybe 200 yards when a massive explosion lit up the night. Zayden turned in the water to see one of the attacking boats erupt into flames, probably hit by a rocket from Jihe's remaining forces. Debris rained across the harbor. Bodies flew through the air. The other crime family boats converged on the speedboat like sharks in blood-dark water. And then, cutting through the chaos, a single gunshot, different from the automatic weapons fire, precise, final. The fighting stopped. Zayden treaded water, straining to see through darkness and distance. On what remained of the speedboat, silhouetted against burning vessels, 2 figures stood. One was Jihe. The other was someone Zayden didn't recognize, older, Korean, wearing the kind of expensive suit that suggested power beyond simple wealth. They were talking. Even from this distance, Zayden could see Jihe's body language shift from commanding to defensive to something that looked almost like fear. The man raised his gun again. Jihe said something, probably pleading, probably offering terms, probably trying to negotiate the same way she'd negotiated everything in her life. The man shot her, not in the head, in the chest, center mass, professional. Jihe stumbled backward, hit the edge of the speedboat, and fell into dark water. She didn't surface. The man holstered his weapon, said something to the remaining soldiers from the crime families, and walked away as if he'd just concluded a business meeting. The boats began to disperse. Bodies floated in the water. The burning helicopter illuminated the cargo ship deck like a funeral pyre. And Jihye Vesper, the woman who'd controlled Seoul's underworld from the shadows for 15 years, disappeared beneath the harbor's oily surface without ceremony or witnesses beyond the people who'd wanted her dead. Rhea made a sound beside Zayden, something between a gasp and a sob. "We need to keep moving," she said, her voice mechanical, "before they realize we're here." They swam until Zayden's arms went numb. Swam until the burning boats were distant orange smears behind them. Swam until Rhea found a concrete pier jutting into the harbor, and they dragged themselves onto it like drowning rats. Zayden collapsed onto cold concrete, coughing up seawater, every muscle screaming. Beside him, Rhea sat with her knees drawn up, staring at nothing, soaked and shaking. "She's dead," Rhea whispered. "My mother is dead." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Rhea's laugh was broken glass. "She orchestrated massacres, manipulated my entire life, was about to have you killed. I should be celebrating. But she was still your mother. She stopped being my mother 15 years ago. Maybe she never was." Rhea wrapped her arms around herself, and in the dim light from distant street lamps, she looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the ruthless queen who'd ruled Seoul's underworld. "I spent my whole life trying to become strong enough that nobody could hurt me. Trying to be what my father wanted, what she wanted. And in the end, I was just their puppet, dancing on strings I couldn't even see." Zayden sat up, ignoring his body's protests, and pulled her against him. She resisted for a second, then collapsed into his chest, finally allowing herself to break. She didn't cry, just shook with silent tremors that were somehow worse than tears. They sat on that pier while Busan's harbor slowly quieted, emergency sirens wailing in the distance, authorities responding to the violence that would be written off as gang warfare. Just another night in the criminal underworld, just another power struggle that left bodies floating in dark water. Eventually, Rhea pulled away, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "We can't stay here. The crime families will be looking for us, trying to determine if we're allies or threats. And I don't have the resources to convince them we're the former." "What do we have?" Rhea checked her pockets, pulling out a waterlogged phone that was definitely dead and nothing else. "Each other. That's it. Everything else, the empire, the accounts, the network, it's gone. Jihye controlled it all, and now that she's dead, it'll be carved up by the organizations that killed her. So we have nothing. We have our lives. For the moment, that's enough." She stood on shaking legs. "There's a contact, someone who owes me a favor from years ago. Lives in Gwangju. If we can reach him, he might give us enough money to disappear. New identities, new country, new everything." "And then what? We just run? Hide? Pretend the last 3 months never happened?" Rhea looked at him with eyes that held exhaustion, deeper than physical. "We survive, Zayden. That's the only plan I have left. We survive, and we try to build something that isn't soaked in blood and manipulation. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm willing to try if you are." Zayden stood, his ankle nearly buckling, and took her hand. "Where's Gwangju?" 3 hours southwest by train," she managed a ghost of a smile. "Assuming we can get there without being recognized, arrested, or killed." "Sounds easy. Sounds impossible. Then we're perfectly qualified." They walked through Busan's industrial district, soaking wet, limping, looking like exactly what they were, survivors of something catastrophic. Nobody paid attention. In a port city at 3 in the morning, desperate people were background noise. Rhea found a 24-hour convenience store and somehow convinced the teenage clerk to let her use the phone. She made 3 calls, short, coded conversations that Zayden couldn't follow. When she hung up, some of the tension had left her shoulders. Daijong survived the warehouse attack. He's in a hospital in Seoul, but stable. He'll send money to a wire transfer location in Gwangju. She glanced at Zayden. "We'll have enough to disappear, start over somewhere Jihee's network can't reach." "Somewhere like where?" "I was thinking Vietnam, maybe Thailand, somewhere warm where nobody knows our faces, and we can just be normal people, living normal lives." Normal? The word felt foreign in Zayden's mouth. He'd forgotten what normal even looked like. They bought dry clothes from a discount store that didn't ask questions, changed in a public restroom, and made their way to Busan Station. The first train to Gwangju left at 6 in the morning. They bought tickets with the last of Zayden's cash and waited in the station's 24-hour cafe, drinking terrible coffee and trying not to look like fugitives. The television above the counter showed morning news. Footage of the harbor firefight. At least 30 dead, the reporter said. Authorities investigating possible gang warfare. No arrests yet. Images of burning boats, bodies being pulled from the water, the crashed helicopter. And then Jihe's face. The news identified her as a prominent businesswoman killed in the crossfire. Vesper Industries was already issuing statements about her tragic death. Board members expressing shock. Financial analysts discussing what this meant for the company's future. No mention of her secret control over Seoul's criminal networks. No mention of the 15-year manipulation. Just a respectable billionaire caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even in death, she was being sanitized, rewritten. Rhea stared at her mother's photograph on the screen, her expression unreadable. "They'll make her a martyr," she said quietly. "Erase everything she actually was. Turn her into a tragic figure instead of a monster." "Does it matter?" "I don't know." Rhea looked away from the screen. "I spent so long hating what she made me become. But without her, without the Empire, without any of it, I don't know who I am. You're Rhea, my wife. The woman who burned an organization to the ground to save me. The woman who chose love over power, even when it cost her everything." Zayden took her hand across the cheap cafe table. "That's who you are. Not what they made you, who you chose to be." She squeezed his fingers hard enough to hurt. "I chose you over and over, even when it was stupid, even when it nearly killed us both." "Same. We're idiots. So we keep telling each other." The train to Gwangju was half empty. They found seats in the back car and collapsed into them, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. Rhea fell asleep against Zayden's shoulder within minutes, her breathing evening out into something almost peaceful. Zayden stayed awake, watching Korea's countryside blur past the window as dawn broke over mountains and rice fields. This country had given him everything and taken it all back. He'd come here with Caroline 3 years ago, naive and hopeful, believing in marriage and career and a future that made sense. Now he was fleeing across the peninsula with a woman he'd known for 3 months, married to a crime lord's daughter, hunted by organizations whose names he couldn't pronounce, carrying nothing except the clothes on his back and a promise that they'd figure out survival together. It should have terrified him. Instead, watching Rhea sleep with ash still in her hair and bruises darkening her face, he felt something close to peace. They reached Gwangju mid-morning. The city sprawled across hills and valleys, smaller than Seoul but still dense with humanity. Rhea led them through crowded streets to a neighborhood that felt residential. Families, students, elderly people practicing Tai Chi in small parks. The contact lived in a modest apartment building that looked like it had been standing since the war. Rhea buzzed apartment 304, waited, buzzed again. The intercom crackled. "Who is it?" "Someone who remembers what you owed her father." Rhea spoke in Korean, her voice carrying weight that transcended language barriers. Silence. Then the door buzzed open. Apartment 304 belonged to a man in his 60s with gray hair and careful eyes. He studied them both for a long moment before stepping aside. "You look like hell, Vesper Yang. I feel worse than I look." Rhea entered the small apartment, Zayden following. "Did Dae-jung contact you?" "He did. Explained the situation. Transferred enough money to get you both out of Korea and somewhere safe." The old man, Rhea never introduced him by name, gestured to an envelope on a small kitchen table. "New passports, new names, cash in US dollars, wire transfer codes for accounts in Bangkok, everything you need to disappear." Rhea picked up the envelope, opened it, and exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank your father for saving my life in 1998. This clears that debt." He looked at Zayden. "You're the one she chose over the Empire." "I'm the one she's stuck with, apparently." The old man almost smiled. "Vesper Nim, your father. He told me once that the Empire would either make her invincible or destroy her. Looks like it did both." "Looks like," Rhea agreed. "For what it's worth, he'd be proud. Not of the Empire falling, but of you walking away from it alive. That takes more courage than building it ever did. Ria's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. We should go. The longer we stay, the more danger I'm in. I know. The old man walked them to the door. There's a travel agency 3 blocks east. They don't ask questions if you pay in cash. Get yourselves on a flight to Bangkok tonight. Don't come back to Korea. Don't contact anyone from your old life. Just disappear and stay disappeared. That's the plan. Good plan. He paused. Vesper Yang, your mother, Ji Hye, she came to see me years ago, tried to recruit me into her network. I refused. She threatened to kill me, and I told her some things are worth dying for. You know what she said? Ria shook her head. She said that I was a fool, that nothing is worth dying for because dead people don't get to enjoy their principles. The old man's expression softened. But you proved her wrong. You found something worth risking death for, worth losing everything for. That makes you stronger than she ever was. Ria nodded, not trusting her voice. They left the apartment building and walked through Gwangju's streets like ghosts passing through a world that no longer knew them. The travel agency was exactly where the old man said it would be, a small storefront wedged between a noodle shop and a pharmacy. The agent barely looked up when they entered. Where to? Bangkok, Ria said. 2 tickets, soonest flight available. Tonight at 11, Korean Air, 200,000 won each. Ria counted out cash from the envelope. The agent processed the tickets without asking for identification, handed over boarding passes with names that weren't theirs, and went back to his computer screen. They had 12 hours before the flight. They spent it walking, through Gwangju's parks and markets and residential neighborhoods where normal people lived normal lives. They bought street food and ate it sitting on a bench overlooking the city. They found a bathhouse and washed away the last remnants of ash and blood and seawater. In the bathhouse's rest area, wrapped in towels and drinking cold barley tea, Ria finally cried. Not violently, just quiet tears that rolled down her face while she stared at nothing. I killed her, she whispered. Not with a gun, but I sent that footage knowing what would happen. Knowing the crime families would see it as betrayal. Knowing they'd come for her. I killed my own mother. She was going to kill me, Zayden said. Was going to kill you eventually. You did what you had to do. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. Ria leaned her head against his shoulder. Promise me something. Anything. When we get to Bangkok, when we start over, promise me we try to be good. Not powerful, not strategic, not untouchable. Just good. Decent people who hurt each other sometimes, but try to do better. I promise. Even when I'm impossible? Especially then. She almost smiled. I don't know how to be normal, Zayden. I've spent my entire life being trained for violence and manipulation. I don't know how to just exist without a war to fight. Then we'll learn together. He tilted her face up, kissing her forehead gently. We'll make mistakes. We'll probably hurt each other in ways we don't intend, but we'll try. That's all anyone can do. That doesn't sound very romantic. No, it sounds real. Real. Ria tested the word. I think I like real. They left the bathhouse as the sun set over Gwangju, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. They had hours still before their flight, so they walked some more, trying to memorize what Korea looked like when it wasn't trying to kill them. At a small park near the airport road, they found a bench beneath cherry trees not yet blooming. Ria sat close enough that their bodies touched from shoulder to knee. What will we do in Bangkok? She asked. I don't know. Get jobs, maybe. Normal jobs. I could go back to financial analysis. I have no legitimate skills beyond running criminal enterprises and looking intimidating. You could teach people how to look intimidating. That's a marketable skill. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind he'd heard so rarely it still surprised him every time. Self-defense classes for billionaire crime lords' daughters. Very niche market. We'll figure it out. Will we, though? She turned to face him, and in the dying light, she looked impossibly young. Be honest, Zayden. What are the odds we actually make this work? 2 broken people with enough trauma to fill a psychology textbook trying to build a normal life in a foreign country with fake passports and blood money? Honestly, maybe 10%, maybe less. That's terrible odds. Yeah. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. But I've beaten worse. We both have. And at least we're facing them together. Ria was quiet for a long moment, watching cherry branches sway against the darkening sky. When I asked you to teach me how to stop caring back in that club, I remember. I thought that was the answer. I thought if I could just feel nothing, I'd be safe, untouchable, like my father, like my mother. But you taught me something different. What's that? That caring is what makes us human. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes surviving worthwhile. She looked at him with eyes that held no mask anymore, no calculation, just raw honesty. You made me want to feel again, even when it hurt, even when it cost me everything. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that gift. Zayden kissed her, soft, gentle, the kind of kiss that promised tomorrow instead of demanding tonight. You already deserve it, he said. You just needed to believe it. They sat on that bench until darkness fell completely and the airport lights began to glow in the distance. Then they stood together, shouldered the small bags they'd purchased with their remaining cash, and walked toward their flight. Toward Bangkok. Toward whatever came next. The plane took off at 11 exactly, rising through cloud cover into clear night sky. Zayden watched Korea disappear beneath them, the lights of Gwangju, then Seoul in the distance, then just darkness and ocean. Beside him, Ria slept with her head against his shoulder, finally exhausted enough to let go. The flight attendant came by offering drinks. Zayden declined. He didn't need whiskey or wine or anything to blur the edges of reality. For the first time in months, reality felt manageable. They arrived in Bangkok at 2 a.m. to humidity that hit like a physical wall. The airport hummed with travelers from every corner of Asia, nobody paying attention to two more tired foreigners clearing customs with unremarkable passports. Outside, the city sprawled in neon chaos, traffic and noise and humanity compressed into every available space. Completely overwhelming, completely anonymous. Perfect. They found a cheap hotel near Kaosan Road, the kind that catered to backpackers and people who preferred cash transactions. The room was small, barely clean, with a window that looked onto an alley market just beginning to wake for the day. Ria stood at that window while Zayden collapsed onto the narrow bed, watching Bangkok's organized chaos unfold below. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I've lived in palaces and penthouses, controlled empires worth billions, had people fear me across 3 countries." She turned from the window, and her expression was lighter than he'd seen it in weeks. "And this might be the freest I've ever felt. In a roach motel in Bangkok?" "In a roach motel in Bangkok with you." She crossed to the bed, sitting beside him. No empire to protect, no enemies to fight, no dead parents pulling strings, just us and whatever we build from here. Zayden pulled her down beside him, and they lay tangled together on cheap sheets while traffic noise filtered through thin walls. "I love you," Ria said quietly. "Not strategically, not as a weapon or a liability, just because you're you, and you saw me at my absolute worst and chose to stay anyway. I love you too, even though you're impossible and dangerous and probably going to drive me insane." "Probably?" "Definitely." She smiled against his chest. "Think we'll make it? Actually build something that lasts?" "I think we'll try. That's all I know how to promise." "That's enough." They fell asleep wrapped around each other while Bangkok hummed outside. 2 people who'd survived assassination attempts and family betrayals and the complete destruction of everything they'd once believed in. They woke late the next afternoon to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of street food cooking below. Ria's phone, the new one they'd purchased at the airport, showed messages from Daejung confirming the wire transfers had cleared. They had money. Not empire money, but enough to live on while they figured out what came next. Over the following weeks, they built something that resembled a life. Zayden found work at a small international consulting firm that needed someone who understood Korean and American business practices. The pay was modest, the work boring, and he'd never been happier. Ria struggled more. She'd spent her entire life being dangerous and powerful. Being normal felt like wearing someone else's skin. She took Thai language classes at a local school, started teaching self-defense at a community center, which turned out to be perfect. She could channel her violence into something constructive. They rented a small apartment in a neighborhood far from tourist areas, where their neighbors were Thai families and elderly Chinese immigrants who minded their own business. They learned to cook Thai food badly. argued about which street vendor made the best pad thai, fell into routines that felt mundane and miraculous in equal measure. Some nights, Ria woke up gasping from nightmares about warehouses burning and her mother's face disappearing beneath dark water. Zayden would hold her until the shaking stopped, and they'd talk until dawn about nothing important. Other nights, they were fine. More than fine. They'd sit on their tiny balcony drinking cheap Thai beer, watching the city pulse below, and Zayden would think about the man who'd walked into Noir Vale 3 months ago, broken, humiliated, asking to be taught how to stop caring. That man was dead. This version of Zayden had scars and nightmares and a wife who could kill someone with her bare hands. But he also had something worth surviving for. 6 months after fleeing Korea, they received a message from Dae Jung. Caroline had remarried. Director Choi, apparently, despite his scandal. She'd moved to Singapore, changed careers, seemed happy, according to the private investigator Dae Jung had hired to check. Ria showed Zayden the report. "How do you feel?" "Nothing." He realized it was true. That whole life feels like it happened to someone else. Because it did. Ria closed the report. The man who loved her died when she asked for an open marriage. The man I married was born somewhere between a nightclub and a burning warehouse. Poetic. I try. She was quiet for a moment. Daejung also sent news from Seoul. Vesper Industries was completely dismantled, absorbed by the crime families that killed Ji Hye. My father's empire is gone. Everything they built, just memory now. How do you feel about that? Relieved, mostly. Ria leaned against him, and they stood on their small balcony watching Bangkok's sunset paint the sky orange and purple. It means nobody's looking for us anymore. We're not valuable enough to hunt. We're just two people who used to be someone important and now aren't. That's freedom. Is it enough? She considered this. Ask me in a year. Right now, it feels like enough. 1 year became 2. Zayden's consulting work expanded. He made legitimate money, built legitimate relationships, lived a legitimate life. Ria opened her own gym, teaching self-defense and martial arts to women who needed to feel powerful. She was good at it, knew how to turn trauma into strength better than anyone. They got better at being married, fought less about Ria's control issues and Zayden's tendency to internalize everything, learned each other's rhythms and breaking points, built something that felt less like survival and more like partnership. Some parts of their past never fully healed. Ria still flinched sometimes when people approached from behind. Zayden still had nightmares about drowning in Busan Harbor, but they carried their scars openly, refusing to pretend they were anything other than survivors of something catastrophic. On their second anniversary, the real one, not the government office paperwork, but the night Ria proposed in a burning parking lot, they returned to Korea for the first time. Not to Seoul, to a small coastal town neither of them had connections to, where they could see the country that had almost destroyed them without triggering every trauma response they'd spent 2 years managing. They walked along the beach at sunset, waves crashing against rocks, the ocean stretching forever toward a horizon they'd once thought would kill them. I never thought we'd make it this far, Ria admitted. Honestly believed we'd destroy each other within 6 months. What changed? We did. Slowly. Painfully. But we changed. She stopped walking, turning to face him. You taught me that being human isn't the same as being weak, that loving someone doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you brave. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that lesson. Zayden took her hands, feeling the calluses from teaching martial arts, the strength that came from rebuilding herself into something new. You're already worthy, he said. You were always worthy. You just needed permission to believe it. She kissed him with the ocean wind whipping around them, salt spray mixing with the taste of her lips, and for a moment they were back in that penthouse overlooking Seoul, two broken people finding each other in the wreckage. Except now they weren't broken anymore, just scarred, healed, whole. They returned to Bangkok the next day, back to their small apartment and their normal jobs and their mundane, beautiful life. 3 months later, Ria discovered she was pregnant. They sat in their tiny living room, staring at the positive pregnancy test like it was written in a foreign language. I don't know how to be a mother, Ria whispered. My mother was a monster. My father was worse. What if I... You won't. Zayden took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. You won't become them because you're choosing not to. Every day, every moment, you're choosing to be better. What if choosing isn't enough? Then we'll get help, therapy, support, whatever it takes. He kissed her forehead. We survived assassination attempts and family betrayals and the complete destruction of everything we'd built. We can survive parenthood. That's not reassuring. It's honest. She almost laughed. I'm terrified. Me too. But we'll be terrified together. Their daughter was born 7 months later in a Bangkok hospital, small and screaming and perfect. Ria held her with shaking hands, staring at the tiny face like she was seeing something she'd never believed could exist. She's real, Ria whispered. Yeah. We made a person. We did. I have no idea what I'm doing. Nobody does. We'll figure it out. Ria looked at Zayden with tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears, just overwhelmed, grateful, terrified tears. Thank you. For what? For teaching me it was okay to want this, to want something soft and vulnerable and completely dependent on me not destroying it. She looked back at their daughter, whose tiny fingers gripped Ria's thumb with surprising strength. For making me believe I could be something other than what they made me. Zayden sat beside her on the hospital bed, wrapping his arms around both of them. You were always more than what they made you. You just needed permission to see it. They named her Maya, a name with no connection to either of their pasts, no legacy of violence or manipulation attached. Just a name they liked, for a person who would grow up knowing nothing about warehouses or crime empires or mothers who orchestrated massacres. She would grow up knowing love, safety. Parents who fought sometimes but always chose each other, who had scars but refused to pass them on. That night, while Maya slept in the hospital bassinet and Ria dozed exhausted beside her, Zayden stood at the window overlooking Bangkok's endless lights. He thought about the man who'd walked into Noir Vale asking to be taught how to stop caring. The man who'd been so broken by betrayal that numbness felt like the only answer. That man had wanted to become cold, untouchable, safe. Instead, he'd become a husband, a father, someone who cared so deeply it still terrified him sometimes. And standing in that hospital room, watching his wife and daughter sleep while Bangkok hummed below, Zayden realized something. He'd gotten exactly what he'd asked for that night in the club. Ria had taught him how to stop caring about all the wrong things, about power, about pride, about protecting himself at the cost of connection. She'd taught him that survival without purpose was just slow death, that vulnerability was the price of being fully alive. And in teaching him, she'd learned it herself. Two broken people who'd been forged in violence and manipulation, choosing every single day to be gentle instead, choosing love over safety, choosing each other over empire. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It wasn't safe or simple or free from the shadows of their past. But watching Ria sleep with their daughter cradled against her chest, both of them breathing in perfect rhythm, Zayden understood one fundamental truth. This was home. Not a penthouse overlooking Seoul, not an estate in the mountains, not an empire built on fear. This small hospital room in Bangkok, with its fluorescent lights and disinfectant smell and two people he would burn the world down to protect. This was what they'd been fighting for all along. They just hadn't known it until they'd lost everything else. Ria stirred, opening her eyes, finding him at the window. Come here. He crossed to the bed, sitting beside them. What were you thinking about? She asked. That I asked you to teach me how to stop caring, and instead you taught me how to care about the right things. She smiled, tired and beautiful and more real than anything he'd ever known. We taught each other. Yeah, we did. Maya made a small sound in her sleep, and they both looked at her. This tiny person who had no idea she'd been born from the ashes of an empire, carried by parents who'd chosen love over power and survived to tell the story. She's going to have a normal life, Ria said quietly. No violence, no manipulation, no empire to inherit, just school and friends and boring regular problems. Sounds terrible. Sounds perfect. They sat together in that hospital room while Bangkok's lights blazed outside and their daughter slept peacefully between them. And neither mentioned that they'd come within inches of death to reach this moment. Neither mentioned the bodies floating in Busan Harbor or the warehouse that burned, or the mother who tried to control everything and died alone in dark water. They just sat, together, whole. Two survivors who'd learned that the strongest thing you could be wasn't untouchable. It was human. And sometimes, against impossible odds, and despite every trauma that said otherwise, human was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end. 3 years later, in a small house outside Bangkok, Zayden watched his daughter chase butterflies through their garden while Ria taught a self-defense class in the converted garage. The house was modest. The life was simple. And when Maya ran to him laughing, dirt on her face and joy in her eyes, he felt something his younger self would never have understood. Gratitude. Not for the empire they'd lost or the power they'd destroyed, but for the night a broken man walked into a nightclub and met a woman who taught him that surviving wasn't the same as living, that love was worth fighting for, even when it cost everything, especially then. And as Maya hugged his legs and Ria caught his eye across the garden, smiling in a way that held their entire history, the violence, the fear, the choice to be better, Zayden knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would do it all again, every mistake, every scar, every moment of terror and triumph, because they led here, to this garden, this family, this life built from wreckage and choice, and that made every single second worth it.